411, Chapter 4, 11 Bearing Fangs. 18th May 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. Never again. That was what Harry was fighting for. That was why he was willing to fight Dumbledore and Grindelwald. It was why he had to win. Still, somber atmosphere aside, Harry was glad to be back, even if he had a lot to do and a lot to prepare. Harry sat on one of the couches in the Slytherin common room with Daphne leaning on his shoulder. It would have been a relaxing atmosphere if it weren't for the entire room watching him as if he were some wild animal that would kill them all on a whim. He really needed to get used to this, especially considering how much it annoyed him. It was funny, before the European tournament, Harry did his best to blend in the background. Oh, he definitely wasn't successful. People still considered him a very powerful and brilliant wizard, especially after the tournament the previous year. The way he humiliated Dumbledore, the way he won with basic tactics and mastery over simple spells, all showed that he was far more proficient than people thought. But when Harry let things loose a bit during the tournament, he was mostly preoccupied with the magical world's opinion of him, not that of his schoolmates. It seemed like such a long time ago as well. It still wasn't what he was truly capable of, not even close, but it was still more than enough to scare most people shitless, especially considering his age. And of course, that included the rest of his housemates. As if she was reading his mind, Daphne grabbed his hand and spoke up with a teasing tone, "Stop glaring at everyone, Harry." "They're the ones staring at me," he grumbled back. "Sure, but they're also about one bad look away from passing out." Tracy seemed to find that amusing. "Oh, you have no idea. We were bombarded by everyone after the task, asking how you did what you did. Like we have any idea what you do in your free time." Harry rolled his eyes. "Yeah, but the staring is a bit much." He gave them all another glare, and the entire common room practically ran away or pretended not to look at him. With a wave of his wand, he erected a few privacy charms before turning back towards his friends, feeling a bit awkward. "So how have things been around here?" "Nice enough. We got promoted in the court. I'm the new Black Bishop. Blaise is the current Black Knight. It was nice at first, but with the war starting off and everything, things have been a bit too tense for house politics. A lot of people here lost their parents because of the Lycan attacks, and the power games here seemed a bit too childish." Harry had forgotten a bit about the whole Court of Slytherin thing. He had never really bought into it, seeing it more like some weird club that made them feel superior. Maybe it was a weird way for purebloods to make friends. The members of the court were mostly either purebloods from very old families or very talented students. It worked somewhat both ways, with the best members of the house getting to know one another in some weird make-believe land. Tracy had obviously bought into the whole thing, and Blaise followed her. He found that he did look down a bit on them for that. It was unconscious, really, but Harry had never considered this to be a good way to secure a future. All he would have done by joining was get to know a few people who probably cared too much about their family lines, something that Harry didn't really care about. Blaise gave him a sad smile. "We all tried to busy ourselves since we barely got news apart from McGonagall or Slughorn calling us to their offices. It was almost always bad news when that happened. I mostly just went to this hidden room you told us about, the Room of Hidden Things. I explored it and tried to find useful stuff that I could fix up. I think it was mostly to distract myself." That sounded pretty sad, all things considered. Then again, students must have been worried sick and bored out of their minds. And a bored mind often went to dangerous places. "I bet you're all happy that the wards are open now." Tracy let out a massive grin. "I just sent a letter to my parents. Hopefully, we'll see them in Hogsmeade this weekend. Hopefully, things have calmed down on the outside. I haven't heard of any casualties in a while." Harry simply shrugged. Things seemed to be winding down. "You obviously know more than that," she pushed. "I do, but you're the one who wanted that I don't involve you too much in my life. I'm just respecting your wishes." Blaise rolled his eyes in response. "Come on, we're not asking for state secrets or whatever." Harry was about to deny it again, only for Daphne to squeeze his hand and murmur, "Come on, you don't have to tell them anything serious. They're just worried about their friends and families." He took a deep breath and sighed. "Fine." Voldemort ran away for some reason. He lost control over the Dementors, who also disappeared a few ago in Tartarus, probably dead. The Red Witch is dead, and the Lycans are currently fighting amongst themselves, but it looks like, after the fighting, they're planning on making an alliance with the Ministry to join as official citizens, which would technically be a deterrent against the ICW involving themselves again. The civil war is essentially over, but there's someone probably planning something during the next task. That's about it. Both Slytherins sat there in silence, gaping completely at him. It was technically overwhelming, and that was him keeping out a lot of things, including Voldemort's death, the Red Witch's true identity, and the light and dark messing with the tournament, and so much more. Daphne was obviously amused by that. Well, I guess I'll have to go unpack. I can't believe I'll have to sleep in a dormitory with other people again. Oh, right, they used to share a room with others. Harry winced and decided not to think about it. Sure, I'm going to do the same. I have just a couple of errands to run first. The blonde gave him an incredulous look. Already? We just got here. It's nothing serious and it shouldn't take long, he answered back. Well, if it isn't serious, then I'm coming with you. Harry's first instinct was to refuse. Daphne had been in enough danger in Greece to last multiple lifetimes, but something stayed his hand. He wasn't planning on doing anything particularly dangerous. It had been a while since he went on a safe adventure with her. He remembered the days when they'd explore the castle, planning to save Hogsmeade from a Death Eater attack. It was weird how that was the safest thing that came into his mind. Holy shit, no wonder Tracy and Blaise wanted none of this. Now that he thought about it, his errands tended to be on the dangerous side. Seeing as what he was planning was relatively harmless, he nodded. Sure. Do you want to unpack first? The blonde blinked in surprise before smiling. No, let's go now. You'll probably get into trouble by the time I'm done anyway. Harry rolled his eyes and motioned to Daphne towards the exit of the common room. They walked up towards the third floor, near one of the wings of the castle that was barely used. Daphne obviously noticed and asked, Where are we going? I don't think there's anything here. Harry gave her a small smile. It makes it a good place to hide something, huh? Before she could voice her confusion, he entered an empty classroom before using his arcane hearing to mimic the basic Parseltongue command he copied off Longbottom almost 2 years prior. Slowly but surely, a small door appeared out of thin air, and Harry pointed dramatically at it. Behold the infamous Chamber of Secrets. She was gaping at him. To be fair, the chamber was a bit of a legend for most families that graduated from Hogwarts. It was often considered no better than a fairy tale. Daphne obviously knew that Harry found it and killed the world serpent, but there was obviously some difference between knowing and seeing for themselves. Daphne quickly schooled her expression and hit him in the shoulder. You were going to the Chamber of Secrets without telling me. It's not a particularly welcoming place, Daph. It's nothing much. I've just been meaning to check something out here. I never had the time, and I've always had a feeling that I missed something the last time I came here. To be fair, I could barely use my magic at the time, after the whole mess with the Gardens of Avalon. She huffed and motioned him to enter the chamber. He jumped into it, and he found himself surrounded by the skeletons of thousands of rodents. With a flick of his wand, he vanished them, and he found himself looking slightly chagrined by the sight. If the previous time the chamber had been in a sorry state, then it was downright miserable now. It could barely be called a chamber, really. The walls, once smooth as if it was made of black marble, now seemed to hunch inward, as though time itself had consumed them. The floor, slick with moisture, stretched before him like a vast expanse of broken tiles, each one now resembling the grotesque, overlapping gigantic scales. The corpse of the basilisk lay in the dim light, its enormous length curled in upon itself, the great serpent's body now half sunken into the stone, as though the chamber had swallowed it whole. Daphne gasped behind him at the sight of the basilisk. You killed that when you were 12. His answer was a snort. No, Neville killed that when he was 12. And he did it with a sword and a few trinkets of all things. Shows you the power of prophecies. Sure, Dumbledore and Grindelwald had been destroying many of them left and right, but they're still extremely potent. I forgot about Longbottom fighting the basilisk, to be honest. Wait a minute. You're telling me that this is not the world serpent? Of course it's not. I'm surprised you assumed it was. Even the Hydra back in Greece was bigger, and I still killed it. No, the world serpent was far more dangerous. I'm sort of very lucky to be alive, I realize that now. I had precisely the exact skill set needed to kill it, Riddle's arrogance included. It was like the stars aligned. That last part was barely more than a mutter. It grated his nerves a bit, now that he understood just how ridiculous the feat was. There was some irony there. Harry manipulated a prophecy to get Neville to fight the basilisk, while he was also manipulated to kill the world serpent. No matter how brilliant he was as a child, killing something like that was beyond ridiculous. Still, he did his best not to bring the mood down and continued, "As I told you before, this entire place, the chamber itself, is the manifestation of the world serpent. It's why it's in so much disarray. It's dead, and we're walking on its corpse. The ground, the very walls, are its scales. I know, but I assumed it would have been a physical creature that was connected to this place as a realm, sort of like how the Olympians were. Where did you even aim the cult to kill it?" Harry simply shrugged. Everything has a core, a source essentially. To be fair, it was completely under Riddle's command, and he probably didn't think that killing it was possible. Of course, I managed to kill it with the only side effect being the start of the apocalypse. I don't understand. How can something be imprisoned inside itself and not have a body? To be honest, I don't either. It's a very unique problem that I never really had the time to crack. It always niggled my mind, the creature that started everything, how little I actually knew what it was. But I never really had the time. I was always busy with one thing or another. I never had the time to properly understand it. This is purely an academic pursuit. He finally had the knowledge necessary to truly understand what the world serpent was. It was always so puzzling. Its existence was a paradox. They lived in a material world, and yet the creature wasn't. Everything, to anchor itself into this realm, had to have a physical manifestation, a way to anchor itself. And yet this creature was not material, not by nature. No living body could ever be as large as the world serpent, who was rumored to be able to wrap itself around the entire planet. Daphne spoke up, with awe in her voice. "And what's that?" Harry turned towards what she was looking at and froze. It was a large spike made of what looked to be ivory. He remembered it being around 5 feet tall the previous year, and yet it had almost doubled in size. That was interesting. The chamber obviously shrank in size, and yet the fang got bigger. How was that possible? Still, from the moment Harry looked at it, he felt drawn. It was as if something was pushing him, telling him how important it was. He spoke up in a reverent tone. "This is the world serpent's fang, and what I came here to check out. After all, if it works like I think it does, then I think that it might be the final piece of the puzzle I need." "For what?" she asked. "To kill the light and the dark once and for all." 412, Chapter 412, Semblance of a Plan. 18th May, 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. The moment Harry looked at it, he felt drawn to it. He spoke up in a reverent tone. "I think that this is the world serpent's fang, and it's the reason why I decided to come here. After all, if it works like I think it does, then I think that it might be the final piece of the puzzle I need." Harry was relatively optimistic when he visited the chamber. For over a year it had niggled at him, the fang that grew out of the ground like a weed, and it was for a very simple reason: the way world serpent was bound just didn't make sense. The assumption he had made in previous years was wrong. He had always assumed that the world serpent at its core was a creature, a living, breathing being that was so dangerous that someone bound it in fear of the destruction it could be capable of, which was how the chamber was born. Now that he had a good understanding of dimensional magic, he understood one fundamental fact. Jörmungandr wasn't a material being, he wasn't even a living thing, but something that reminded him eerily of Nidhogg. The world serpent was a realm of its own, much like Lily's own, which manifested some form of consciousness. Its size defied understanding for the simple reason that it had no size. It had no beginning or end. Maybe the beast was artificially created. Maybe someone discovered it by accident. Maybe it was left there by the gods before they left the material plane. But something had bound the consciousness by folding the dimension into itself so densely that it acted like a shackle. What Harry killed with the Colt was the source of the dimension, The consciousness that had been imprisoned, which had been the center of the bindings. The chamber wasn't shrinking, not really. It was more like it was untangling, and the fake imitation of a material realm was slowly overwhelmed by the remaining energy, with the bindings slowly being destroyed. It had been his theory when he entered the room, and now, with his basic grasp of Solomon's magic and his arcane hearing, he knew that it was a confirmation. The magic was horrific on so many levels, but it was also beautiful. Whoever made this prison was beyond a genius. They had literally contained the infinite by using itself as a fuel. They had taken a multi-dimensional being and twisted it into a mockery of three-dimensional space, turned it into a fucking room of all things. If he had to guess, Harry would say that it was made to be used as a weapon, ready to be released and cause as much damage as possible, probably bound to a bloodline or forced to obey Parseltongue somehow. A prison and a leash. What a miserable existence it must have had, passed down from one generation to another like some sort of pet. The fang that was growing from the ground wasn't really one. This realm was obviously meant to act like a weapon, and this was the material expression of that role, its three-dimensional representation. If Harry's theory was correct, whoever bound the beast was more than powerful enough to deal with any material threat. The magic was just that impressive. The obvious knowledge of dimensional magic meant that Jörmungandr was probably meant to attack rogue realms. And if the fangs were a three-dimensional expression of the serpent's weapon, then it should be meant to pierce into realms, hurt them, and by extension, a very valuable tool against the light and dark. It was a bit of a shot in the dark, one built of hundreds of assumptions, but there was no reason why he shouldn't try to figure it out. And as he approached the fang, he was getting a headache trying to understand what he was hearing. It was like a resonance that kept shifting between realms, a pincer which shifted between the material and immaterial. The magic itself was changing, adapting over time, like a knife cutting through the air. Yes, he was right. The fang was obviously a method to pierce the protection of anything it could touch, even dimensions. Harry could barely understand how it worked, how it shifted without any consciousness behind it. Without even meaning to, Harry was walking closer and closer, almost reaching to touch the fang, only to freeze as he saw some black liquid slowly seeping from the top, making almost imperceptibly thin veins in its path. Venom. Harry had never really thought much about the Jörmungandr's venom. If the fangs were the breach, maybe the venom would act like a poison, infecting the target dimension somehow. He needed to study it. It took a single flick of his wand to conjure a small crystal vial to examine it further, only for the conjuration to disappear the moment it touched the venom. Magical negation, then. Very interesting. He turned towards Daphne and asked, "Do you have a vial? One without any charms or enchantments, please." Yeah, he was lucky that the blonde asked him to expand her coat's pockets to always have access to her school materials, which thankfully also included potion vials. She tossed one to Harry, and he grabbed it in mid-air and made sure that the liquid didn't touch anything else. It took a couple of minutes, but a small amount of the venom was now inside the liquid, thankfully, not eating through it. After a few minutes of trying to analyze the venom with his arcane hearing, he muttered, "Curious." "What's curious?" Daphne asked. "This is the work of two people. Their skills were obviously very different. There was the original venom, which is absolutely made with a specific purpose. I can't really tell what it was. It's somehow detecting the fact that I'm trying to understand it. However, there's a constant part, one that someone with far less skill was trying to experiment with it. The magic is something I can only properly analyze with Solomon's system. If I had done it normally, it would have seemed constant. Holy shit." Harry cast a quick spell at the vial while carefully monitoring it with his arcane hearing, only for it to unravel. It wasn't exactly being absorbed or destroyed, but unraveled. Whatever structure the spell had dissipated. It was very familiar, and it was done by the magic that was added near the end. It didn't negate magic, it just removed the structure, and Harry finally understood why he felt like he was missing something. Oh, how did he not recognize it from the start? The dark. That was what was being added in the end. That was why it was so familiar. It behaved very similarly to Grindelwald's magic. It introduced chaos into any form of structured spell and destroyed it completely. The venom held a fragment of the essence of the dark, for the lack of a better description. And it wasn't hard to understand who had done it. Salazar Slytherin, you magnificent bastard. Daphne spoke up behind him. What is it, Harry? His smile widened at the question. Salazar Slytherin. He's the reason I'm going to win. Oh, that madman. Absolutely brilliant, but mad nonetheless. Harry, I swear if you're not going to explain, I'm going to hit you. He smiled at her. Salazar Slytherin was probably the last champion of the dark that had access to the world serpent. He didn't want to cause Ragnarok, of course, but instead of ignoring it like whatever predecessor might have had, he decided to study it. Now, it'll take me time to properly understand how the world serpent's venom works. It's quite a marvel of magic. But obviously Slytherin didn't either. But given its nature, I think it was made as a weapon against gods and eldritch entities. It doesn't matter, really. What's important is what Slytherin did. And what did he do? He somehow was able to add the dark's essence in the venom. Daphne gave him an unimpressed look. And how does that change anything? Harry could understand why the blonde wouldn't get why this was such a big deal. She had witnessed Grindelwald destroying the realm of Olympus on his own and vaporizing an entire mountain. She had witnessed the Olympians and the might they held and knew that they were barely a threat compared to the light and dark. What was some venom compared to that? Honestly, it was the dark's essence that was extremely pertinent. He now had a sample of the entity, a proper sample, made by a dark champion, and that alone made returning to Hogwarts worth it. As for the world serpent's original venom, it would probably take Harry a lifetime to study it. It wasn't that he was incapable of doing so, or didn't have the tools to understand it, but he had a feeling that the magical theory that currently existed would just be not enough. This was essentially like trying to understand quantum mechanics in the Middle Ages. The gap in knowledge and theory was just that large. He would do so eventually when Ragnarok was over and done with. At least he hoped it would. Harry responded with a smug smile. Oh, Daph, this changes everything. Daphne threw a hex at him, angry at him for not explaining, which he blocked effortlessly with an amused smile on his face. Fine, I'll explain. I came here because I thought the ivory from the fangs could have let me break through dimensional barriers far easier for my plan. But this, Salazar Slytherin was planning the same thing as I am now, only just against the light. He was planning on using the world serpent as a weapon, hoping to attack the light directly. If I had to guess, Gryffindor found out about it, and it was why they fought, with Slytherin being banished from the castle. It's so funny, Voldemort had craved a weapon against the light and dark, and yet he had one completely at his mercy, bound to his bloodline, without even knowing it. It's sort of sad, really. So, you're planning on using the venom against the light and dark somehow? Harry grinned. Of course I am. The plan was to build a dimensional weapon that could attack the light and dark in their own dimensions. The fang was a good way to act as an entry point, a way to pierce through the dimensions, whose location I knew thanks to Solomon. My biggest problem was finding something that could act like a weapon. How do you kill something that's so large, so powerful, that you can't even comprehend? That was the problem, the final problem. I needed a silver bullet, something that could hurt even gods. I had ideas, of course, but this has potential. Slowly he walked towards the gigantic fang and let himself be embraced by the magic, through his arcane hearing. Slowly but surely he found himself singing, matching its tune. He didn't even know how he did what he did, but he could feel his family crest slowly burning slightly, somehow translating his desire into song, and the previously indestructible fang moved around as if it was made of mud, shrinking into itself, or it was more like crystallizing into a single item of condensed power. If he had been anyone else, even with the same skill set, it wouldn't have worked. Harry's authority over the beast was as absolute as its slayer. He wasn't really going to lie and say that he researched the matter extensively, but the spoils of war were a thing. It was why making an artifact with a creature that you had killed personally was so much easier, and tended to be more potent than with any other thing. To be completely honest, Harry never really cared for the practice. The boost was minor at best, and Harry tended to prefer efficiency over raw power when he made any enchantments. Even then, he rarely used magical creatures as the core to any of them. If he had to guess, it would be that the act of slaying a creature in single combat was some sort of established ritual with certain conditions. It wasn't that powerful, really, and it didn't translate to possessions. It was more like winning the allegiance of a wand than anything. It seemed like this principle translated with the world serpent somehow. It allowed Harry to ask the realm to be shaped, and it agreed. After all, there was no consciousness to resist him, and the energy saw him have a sliver of authority over it. Whatever the reason, Harry was too preoccupied to really worry about it. What mattered was that it worked. Minutes later, all that remained was a small white dagger made of bone on the ground. The weapon had small black veins that were akin to cracks than anything, which glowed chaotically. Harry smiled to himself, a fragment of the dark in the palm of my hands. Daphne was struck speechless by the act, staring at the dagger in shock, awe, and most of all, hope, before schooling her expression, "Harry, how are you planning on using a dagger to hurt an entire dimension?" "Looks can be very deceiving, Daph." "And who said that this was all there was to it?" Harry answered with a mysterious grin. "But now I have a proper plan in place, something workable that might actually work. All I need now is a fragment of the light." "I'm sure Dumbledore will be more than happy to help you," she replied with a sarcastic tone which didn't hide the hope and pride that he could sense through his arcane hearing. "Well, lucky for us, we don't have to. Long ago, a desperate alchemist used a ritual to save his dying wife. It was a horrific act. The lives of thousands of people were lost, one of them being a child, a future champion of the light. His very life force, filled to the brim of the light, was absorbed in the ritual, crystallized in an artifact that he used to live far past what was natural." He relished the look of shock on the blonde's face. "Nicholas Flamel, you're looking for the Philosopher's Stone?" "Of course, my dear." And thankfully, the alchemist hid the stone before his untimely demise, stopping Dumbledore from getting his hand on it. If Perenelle Flamel was as good a seer as she seemed to be, she should have foreseen this. She would have found a way to help, to put him on the path to find the stone. And he knew where exactly to look to find the clues. After all, there had to be more to the diary they left him other than lessons in alchemy, which he barely got the opportunity to use. 413, Chapter 4. 13. Friendly Gems. 20 May 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. Daphne Greengrass always knew that Harry was different. He'd been different ever since their first ride on the Hogwarts Express, and he was still different now. When she imagined Dumbledore or Voldemort as students in Hogwarts, she assumed that they were born more powerful than their professors and that they could do impossible things with just their raw power. A part of her hoped that they'd been normal students who truly shined after they finished their education. For years she'd been picturing them to be like Harry, and it took her embarrassingly too long to realize that this comparison really wasn't fair. For them, of course. The last Potter had the ability to absorb magic like it was a sponge. He just invented new fields of magic, or was it rediscovered? It didn't matter because he did it entirely on his own. The madman turned an expansion charm into an entirely new field, which was absurd. He mastered a charm so much that he could cast it without even trying, that he warped its main functionality into something more. For fuck's sake, he was able to make portals based on that spell, and that's not to mention the whole dimensional magic, which she still didn't understand. She'd been so glad to see Harry when he got back that she hadn't considered the magic he used to travel between universes. He'd told her about it, of course, but it just didn't register until then. The visit to the Chamber of Secrets was a massive wake-up call. The mess with World Serpent aside, which was beyond ridiculous. She knew that Harry was bullshit, but come on, that thing was insane. She didn't think she could defeat the basilisk whose corpse she saw there, not alone. To think that Longbottom did it when he was 12, and with a sword of all things. Was she so inadequate compared to Harry? Sadly, when it came to magical combat, it was a massive understatement. She didn't think she could fight someone like Dumbledore to a standstill or trick an enemy into defeating themselves with their own power. She wasn't a magical genius who could create and alter spells on the fly or had so much raw power that she could destroy a mountain with an overpowered blasting charm. When it came to Harry's life and the dangers that surrounded him, she was at best useless, and at worst a liability. She was literally his biggest weakness. The sad part is that she could see it happen, Dumbledore taking her hostage to stop Harry, and he would stop if it meant that she would be safe. And she would have no one but herself to blame. She had chosen to be in a relationship with Harry, and she did so while knowing exactly how dangerous it would be. She could have technically done the same as Tracy and Blaise, asked not to be involved in his messy affairs, and slowly distanced herself from him. As much as they were all friends, they hadn't been truly close since the day Tracy and Blaise did that. It wasn't because anyone was angry or even done purposefully. It happened because there were fewer things for them to talk about. They had chosen to live a quiet life, away from the fighting, and that just naturally set them on different paths. Her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "So, what's with the frown? Did Harry do something?" She turned towards the source and saw the familiar form of Tracy giving her a concerned look. "No, Harry didn't do anything. He's stuck trying to figure out a puzzle in an old book. You know how he is. How did you find me, though?" The blonde had purposefully chosen to stay out of the castle to avoid all the stairs and get some privacy. She had chosen to stay near Harry's favorite spot, one that she grew to love as well, under the shade of a tree on the edge of the Black Lake. The brunette rolled her eyes. "You're literally sitting in Harry's favorite spot. Did you seriously think that I would forget?" Daphne simply shrugged. "I couldn't deal with the staring." Tracy snickered. "Well, apparently you're a gold digger or something. Rumor has it you're in a love triangle with Harry and Carmichael and are cheating on them both with the other one." For Merlin's sake, Harry was disguised as Eddie Carmichael. "I'm not in some twisted love triangle. I swear, I want to strangle whoever started that rumor." "Huh, seriously? That makes a lot of sense. From what I heard, Carmichael did surprisingly well. He was good and everything, but he definitely wasn't like the rumors. With the ban being lifted, Blaise has been going spare trying to buy omnioculars with the recordings of the tasks on them. I'm a bit curious myself. He's been having some trouble with the last task since the ICW has confiscated a lot of them because of, all the deaths and everything. But that's not important. What I'm most curious about is whether you and Harry are finally dating. You were always close, but it feels different, I guess." The blonde gave her an unimpressed look and nodded. "Yes, Harry and I are in a relationship." "Hey, there's no need to be so formal. I'm just relieved and a bit surprised. For some reason, I thought that you'd keep circling around each other without making any progress. I'm happy for you." "Thanks, Tracy," Daphne replied. The brunette, though, asked, "So what are you doing here, on your lonesome? There are a lot of ways to stop the staring. Privacy charms are a thing, you know." "I just needed some time to think." "Care to share?" "I know it's been a while since we've talked like this, but—" She trailed off near the end, but Daphne got her point. They hadn't had a girl talk in almost a year. She supposed she lost nothing by sharing, "I guess I'm feeling like I'm lacking compared to Harry, like I'll be left behind." "That's ridiculous, Daphne. You're an amazing witch." "I'm a very good witch, I know that. I can probably run circles around Newty students in a few subjects, but compared to Harry, compared to what he deals with, it all feels so small. I'm not going to go into the details. I respect your decision to stay out of it, but the things Harry can do are so far beyond classes that it's not funny." Tracy rolled her eyes. "Believe me, I know how bullshit Harry can be. Do you remember that time we stopped an attack on Hogsmeade because of some visions he had? We ended up catching Greyback's entire pack and 3 of you-know-who's Death Eaters who had escaped during Azkaban's destruction. We were barely 13 at the time, and he got us to do that. Harry was always on another level. We accepted that a couple of months into our first year. But that doesn't make you less of a witch. You're also considering that Harry personally dedicated his time to master his magic, while you're still trying to save your sister. You have 2 completely different priorities." Daphne looked away, feeling embarrassed. "Actually, Astoria's curse is gone." "Wait, what?" the brunette exclaimed. "How?" "Harry bullshit," she answered, not wanting to share with someone the stupid decision she took of taking the curse to herself. It had worked out in the end, sure, but it could have gone very badly. She should have saved the idea of taking the curse to herself until Astoria's condition was truly dire, but not recklessly do it because she grieved Harry's death at the time. Tracy seemed surprised before solemnly nodding, "Ah, Harry bullshit." They both stared at one another before bursting into laughter. Minutes later, as they calmed down, Daphne spoke up. "Thanks for talking to me. I needed this." Tracy gave her a faint smile. "So you really did it, huh? I remember how serious you were about it back when you were little girls. I had never seen someone my age with so much drive before. It was honestly pretty amazing. I have to ask, though, what are you planning to do moving forward? Are you sticking with your decision to be a healer?" Daphne looked hesitant when she answered, "I don't know. Without Astoria's curse and the threat of her dying, the idea of studying for decades after Hogwarts, while not being allowed to share anything, seems unappealing. I guess that without the lure of obscure knowledge that might help me save my sister, the whole thing lost its shine." Looking back, Daphne hadn't learned a lot of healing. Oh, she studied what little was available for the general public, but she quickly hit a roadblock in the progress she could feasibly make before joining the Healers Guild. To compensate, she had focused on curses, and there, Lily's tutoring was more than enough to occupy her time. Curses had a certain shine to them. Sure, a lot of offensive magics just got stuck with the label without really being one, especially if the effects were horrific. Curses were essentially magic that lasted a certain time, and whose effect lingered on the victims while being hard to remove. Lily had focused on teaching her how to use these curses to power her own spells, how to use blood magic to break them, and even how to craft some of her own. There was always some excitement when she dealt with curses, like a puzzle she would have loved nothing more than to figure out. Maybe being a curse breaker would be a nice idea. She knew that Harry probably wanted to be one too, eventually, if only to explore magical ruins and interpret the ancient magic used at the time. Maybe they could end up exploring tombs together. Tracy broke her from her thoughts. "Well, at least your parents will be glad. I know your father never liked the fact that you wanted to be a healer instead of focusing on the family business." Daphne stiffened slightly, and the brunette read her like a book. "He doesn't know, does he? How the hell did you hide Astoria being healed from him?" "I didn't. I just didn't say anything about it. He just thinks that my sister is getting better and that it's a phase. I gave her an enchanted bracelet a year ago and it contained her curse for a bit. She got better, and then, as the curse adapted to the bracelet, she got worse. He's probably expecting the same thing to happen. Are you seriously never going to tell him? I'll admit that your dad can be a bit much, but Astoria is still his daughter. What about your mother? You can't tell me that she doesn't deserve to know that her daughter isn't going to die." Damn it. She was right. Why did she have to be right? To say that Daphne's relationship with her father was strained was an understatement, and that was saying something. She loved him, of course, but one did not have to like someone to love them. Her father, Cyrus Greengrass, was ambitious. He wanted to grow his family and make it into a political powerhouse, as well as an economic one, and he obviously wanted to use Harry to scare off whatever opposition he might face. He was cold, pragmatic, and obsessed with his legacy and that of his ancestors. If he was a stranger, she wouldn't have liked to know him, but this was also the man who scoured the world and wasted a small fortune in the vain hope of saving Astoria. This was the man who taught her their family magic, who told her tales of her ancestors when she was nothing more than a child, and she couldn't help but love him, just as she knew he loved her. Her mother, though, gave her the warmth that her father lacked. She was strong, steadfast in her beliefs, brilliant, and could understand her like no one else. Daphne hadn't treated them well after Harry had disappeared. She had rebuffed their consoling words and kicked them out when they wanted to comfort them. They weren't perfect, but they were her parents, and they deserved to know that Astoria was safe. Daphne nodded solemnly at the brunette, who wisely changed the subject. "Speaking of changes, I know that this is a bit out of the blue, but I have to ask. Now that you got what you wanted, are you still going to go on adventures with Harry? I know that it was one of the biggest reasons why you didn't stay away like Blaze, and I did. No one would blame you for being scared. I can tell that being around him is pretty dangerous, and I don't even have the full picture." The blonde gaped at the question. "Are you serious?" "Of course, I'm going to stand with him. I love him." They both froze when she said that last bit. She hadn't even meant to say that. It just came out. She wanted to say something, only for Tracy's face to morph into a very happy smile. I just needed to be sure. I wanted to know if you felt pressured or something, but I can see that you're not. As much as I'm not ecstatic about you being in danger, I'm happy for you, Daff." The blonde smiled back at her before letting out a sigh. "It's also why I feel so useless all the time. Harry is wonderful, but compared to him, what he deals with, I am a liability." Tracy grabbed her hand. "Daff, we both know that Harry is bullshit, but even then, the two of you specialized in very different forms of magic. Sure, you're less powerful than he is, and can't craft spells on a whim like he does, but that doesn't mean that you can't complement him with your magic. Focus on what you're good at. Make yourself the best at it, and I guarantee you that you won't be left behind. Just think about it." The brunette squeezed her hand gently before getting up and leaving Daphne to her thoughts. What was she good at? What magic did she know that Harry didn't? The answer was simple: her family crest and the blood magic that she learned from Lily. Daphne had somewhat neglected to practice with her family crest in a while, focused mostly on her lessons with Lily and Astoria's health rather than what she had inherited as a greengrass. Could she combine the two? They were vastly different fields of magic. No, it was more than that. They were polar opposites of one another. Her druid magic was based on the idea of nurturing life, whereas her blood magic was built on the concept of sacrifice. Daphne didn't want to ask Harry for help for that one. He'd probably figure it out in a second without even meaning to, but this was her chosen magic. Exploring it is supposed to be a personal experience, an adventure on his own. Just like Harry slowly enriched his space and time magic, she would do the same. One day, she vowed, she wouldn't be a liability. She would stand side by side with Harry as an equal, as a true partner, and today would be the first step. She was free now, free of her sister's curse, free of her own impending death. All that worrying, all that anxiety was gone, and it was all because of Harry. The least she could do was to make sure that he wouldn't be alone by finally becoming the partner he needed, the partner he deserved. Before she could think on it further, a glowing white dove flew towards her and spoke in Harry's voice. "I found where the stone is. Come to the common room. We're leaving tonight." How about that? It looked like the rest of the day was going to be exciting after all. 414. Chapter 414, Herbal Growth. 20. May 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. Before she could think on it further, a glowing white dove flew towards her and spoke in Harry's voice. "I found where the stone is. Come to the common room. We're leaving tonight." How about that? It looked like the rest of the day was going to be exciting after all. It was after curfew that Daphne snuck down from her dormitory. She had been curious all day about where Harry found the Philosopher's Stone, as he told her earlier. The stone was an artifact, unlike anything that the world had ever seen. As much as people didn't like to talk about it, there were numerous attempts to steal it, and sometimes even wars were fought over it. France had become a bit of a magical hotspot ever since its existence spread out. It was only Nicolas Flamel's ability in subterfuge that stopped them. The alchemist left traps, made fake strongholds, and always seemed to know whenever someone was planning on attacking him. He made plans within plans, so much so that after centuries, people had essentially given up on it, bar a few idiots every once in a while. It didn't help that the Flamels tended to disappear for decades at a time, so tracking them down, alone, was a tedious endeavor. Then again, who could blame them? The stone held the key to eternal youth and riches. With that alone, a magical nation could become a powerhouse in the international scene. That's not to mention the possibility of the stone being used as a weapon. The energy that experts theorized had to exist in it could probably erase a small country from existence if released all at once. It was a marvel of magical theory, and yet, now that she knew where it came from and how it was made, Daphne couldn't help but feel like the mystery wasn't worth it. The stone wasn't the epitome of alchemy. Sure, the magical container might have been, but the roots of its creation were based purely on blood magic. Sacrifice. Flamel sacrificed thousands of people, took their potential lifespan, and used it to power some transmutation array, one turning any liquid into a potent healing potion, and the other that turned any metal into gold. If she had to guess, he had to have had something resembling the elixir of life, which he analyzed and used it as the target of the transmutation. All in all, while the container itself, as well as the pre-programmed spells, were made using alchemy, the rest was pure blood magic, with a mixture of the essence of light messing with everything. Her thoughts were interrupted by Harry speaking up. "Good, you're up. I was scared you'd overslept or something." She grumbled slightly, hearing the teasing in his voice. "I was just making sure that I didn't forget anything. And it was hard, considering you didn't even tell me where we're going." "Where's the mystery in that?" he asked brightly. Daphne knew that Harry wasn't really to blame for this. She had class to go to for the rest of the day, while he was free, probably preparing for their quest. The blonde really wished she could miss classes as well. While, as champions of the European tournament, attending classes wasn't technically mandatory, McGonagall implemented a rule where you needed your guardian's permission to miss them. Harry was completely free since Arcturus just signed the letter without even blinking, but Daphne wasn't under the delusion that her parents would ever agree so easily, even if she was ahead of her peers in most subjects. That meant that Harry tended to only attend classes when he had some free time. And since he's planning on stopping the end of times, that was pretty far in between. He did his best, though, but Daphne knew that he had a lot of pressure on his shoulders. Still, deciding to humor him, she asked, "So, any plans on telling me where we're going now?" The grin her gave her was one of the truest ones that she had seen in a while. Pure wonder, that was what was written all over his face. How long has it been since she'd seen him exhibit this emotion? It had to be at least a year, maybe even 2. Nowadays, his smiles were more tired, victorious, and sometimes a bit vicious, which was a sharp contrast to the wonder on his face when he studied magic without any expectations. Whatever the result of their little expedition, she was thrilled to see him look like that. Not noticing Daphne smiling gently at his face, Harry took out a small book, Flamel's diary, and put it on the ground and spoke up. "I was a bit of an idiot. I tried to find some kind of hidden message somewhere, and it occurred to me hours later to use magic to sense it. It took a bit, but the moment I used Solomon's magic to try to detect any hidden magic, I got this." His finger glowed slightly, and suddenly the book levitated and started to project dozens of glowing symbols, runes, ones that she had never seen before, which combined with glowing threads, as if it was some kind of weird arithmetic equation. So the Flamels knew Solomon's magic. The magic itself isn't folded into itself, nor is it as efficient. They knew of the magic, enough to detect its use, probably by detecting a working spell that wouldn't be complete if it used some form of traditional magic. Perenelle Flamel, being a seer, could have easily asked her husband to add it in. No, what's more curious are the runes. Can you recognize them from anywhere? Not that I can think of. He smiled even more wildly. Neither did I. I know a thing or two about runes, but I've never seen anything like this before. It took me a while to figure it out. This isn't a rune matrix, it's a spell. Harry waved his hand, and slowly the runes shifted around, forming a circle, with the threads somehow acting as borders. She had seen something similar before. "It's like one of your magic circles." It is. Believe it or not, before the wands became widespread thanks to the Romans, magic circles were the most efficient way to cast any magic. It took a little while to properly decipher the runes by trying to sense the concept of every single one of them personally. It turns out that runes have a certain impact that I could sense using Solomon's magic, an impact that I could understand a bit. And then, when I had a good idea what it was, I cast it, and that's what came out. He waved his hand, and a magical circle materialized, conjuring a small globe of the entire Earth, with a single glowing dot. It was somewhere near Bristol. Harry, still looking excited, continued, "I'm guessing you want to know where this is." "The Forest of Dean. It's a very old magical forest filled with druidic sites. It's weirdly open for muggles as well, not that they'd see anything, with everything being covered with layers of magic. Funnily enough, it has so much ambient magic that it could be used pretty effectively to hide something magically powerful, something like the Philosopher's Stone. I think that this is it." Daphne didn't answer, just happy to see the sheer excitement on Harry's face. He tilted his head in confusion. "What is it?" "Nothing, I just forgot how happy you got when you explored a new form of magic. It's adorable." The boy scratched the back of his neck in embarrassment. "Hey, I am not adorable." "Whatever you say, Harry," she teased back. He huffed and grumbled, "Let's just get there." With a flick of his hand, a portal opened in front of them and swallowed them to the other side. The blonde yelped, "Hey, you could have warned me." Harry retorted with a cheeky grin, "Oh, you just look adorable when you're surprised." "Well played, Potter. Well played indeed." They smiled at one another, and Daphne finally took the time to look at her surroundings. She took a deep breath and felt like she was back in her bed at home, extremely comfortable. The blonde could understand why Harry said that this forest was deeply magical. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fresh pine, a blend of moss and ancient wood that wrapped around them like a warm, familiar blanket. The trees stood tall and proud, their thick trunks covered in a shimmering veil of emerald green lichen. The forest itself seemed alive, pulsing with a gentle hum that resonated beneath the soles of her boots. Daphne could feel the subtle tug of something old and powerful in the air, an energy that made her skin tingle as if the forest had been waiting for them. It wasn't just a place, it was a living, breathing thing, and every inch of it seemed steeped in centuries of forgotten history, which it wanted to share so badly, like a grandparent telling a grandchild of their family's history. That alone made the whole trip worth it. Daphne was a bit anxious when she insisted that she would join Harry on his adventure, especially given that it was outside the castle and that her boyfriend had no clue what would happen next. The way nature slowly murmured, as if it was welcoming back a child, was nothing like she ever felt before. She could almost make out what it wanted to say, only for her concentration to break as Harry released a surprised yelp. The blonde turned towards her boyfriend and saw that the diary was vibrating in his hands and started to glow, revealing runes similar to the ones it projected back in Hogwarts. Suddenly, a ball of golden light appeared in the air and slowly flew away. North, if her point me charms were correct. The movement was slow enough that the intent was obvious. The ball of light wanted them to follow it. They did so, and it didn't take long until they found themselves in front of a wall of mist. They persisted until suddenly everything changed. The night sky turned bright, but there wasn't a sun in the sky. Instead of the intense heat, the light seemed slightly faded, as if it was slowly dissipating through layers of dense fog. The air had an odd, almost metallic chill to it, and the mist clung to their skin like a damp shroud. Daphne squinted ahead, where the faint outline of land appeared through the fog, emerging like a phantom from the shadows. They stepped forward, and the mist parted just enough to reveal a small, still lake, its surface unnaturally smooth and untouched by even the slightest ripple. The water was so clear that it reflected the grey sky like a mirror, though it seemed deeper than any lake had the right to be. The light flew down into the lake, and its glow slowly faded as it sunk into its depth. "What is this place?" she breathed out. Harry was concentrating very hard on something, his expression blank, but Daphne knew him enough to realize that he was both amazed, but also slightly anxious. "This is another realm, a dimension. It's like Mount Olympus, but on a far smaller scale. Still, whoever did it was impressive, and definitely someone I'd like to talk to." Daphne rolled her eyes. "How many secret realms are there? Can't you just detect them so that we don't keep getting taken off guard?" "Realms are a source of power. It's enough to fight wars over. The Flamels are old enough that they could have stumbled into how to make one." "You think that Nicholas Flamel did this?" Harry shook his head. "I don't know, but it's an ideal place to hide something that's very magically powerful. The forest's magic would stop anyone from detecting the entrance, and the realm would be able to hide any signature from leaking into the outside world. It's a very clever solution. The magic here is also weird. It's more raw, chaotic, maybe enough to throw off divination attempts." Before Daphne could ask anything, Harry raised his hand toward the lake, where the golden light had disappeared. Slowly, a small golden boat began to rise from the water, covered in the same runes as the diary. It looked almost brand new, no signs of wear from the water or time, no oars, no sails, just a sleek, inviting little vessel with its bow lifted slightly, like it was asking them to hop in. Without saying anything, Harry and Daphne exchanged a look and climbed into the boat. The moment they did, it shifted, gliding silently across the lake. There was no splash, no sound, just this smooth, almost eerie movement through the still water. The golden glow had faded, but the boat seemed to know exactly where it was going, guiding them through the mist. As the boat drifted further from the shore, the fog thickened around them. Slowly, though, the mist began to clear, revealing an enormous palace. It was so huge, it seemed to stretch forever, with towering spires reaching up into the clouds. It should have been breathtaking, if it weren't falling apart. Vines covered the walls, some so thick they reached the tops of the spires, and the carvings on the walls were so worn down from age that Daphne couldn't make sense of them. The boat stopped at the base of a giant set of stairs leading up to the palace's grand entrance, coming to a smooth halt. They stepped out, staring up at the massive doors, which creaked open on their own the moment they stood before them. If she had to describe what she was seeing, it would be a gigantic throne room. The floor looked like it was made of ice, and the walls were a very light blue and were decorated with hundreds of small decorated windows. And yet, the magic felt dead. Compared to the forest outside, this felt more like a tomb than anything. She suddenly turned around, swearing to have seen some movement, only to see nothing. She felt Harry tense. He definitely knew something that she didn't. She met his eyes and he spoke. "We're not alone here." As if they waited for him to speak, dozens of ghosts kept floating, giving them apathetic looks. She took a sigh of relief, but she could feel that Harry got tenser, if anything. She gave him a questioning look. "What is it?" "It's just ghosts." "They're not just ghosts. They're ghosts of Fae. We need to get out of here." Now that he pointed it out, she could tell that the ears were definitely pointier, their eyes slightly wider than normal, and their features sharper. Oh shit. She heard horror stories about the Fae, and coming into their homes was generally a bad idea. Why would the Flamels send them to this place? A strange feminine voice spoke up. "I think not. It took a lot of effort to get you to come here, Peveril." Daphne turned towards its origin, only to find a woman, no, a Fae, sitting on the throne, peering down at them imperiously. She had to admit that she was slightly intimidating. Harry, though, looked her straight in the eyes and asked, "You know who I am, but I do not know who are." "Oh, but you do know who I am. My sire's named Nimue, but you know me by a different name. After all, I went through so much trouble to meet you here. I had to enchant that diary my husband planned to leave for you." That seemed to take Harry off guard. "You mean?" "Ah, yes. I suppose you would better know me as Perenelle Flamel, wife of Nicholas Flamel." What the actual fuck? 415. Chapter 415, Fairy Tales. 20. May 1995, The Forest of Dean. "I had to enchant that diary my husband planned to leave for you." That seemed to take Harry off guard. "You mean?" "Ah, yes. I suppose you would better know me as Perenelle Flamel, wife of Nicholas Flamel." What the actual fuck? Harry knew that something was off the moment they arrived at the fortress. He had expected Nicholas Flamel to make retrieving his stone somewhat simple, given the fact that he and his wife had obviously planned for that eventuality. One of the biggest issues with something as powerful as the Philosopher's Stone was the fact that the energy could easily be traced back. Harry had expected Flamel to hide it in another dimension, but using the Forest of Dean's natural ambient magic to mask it was a clever way to do it as well. Finding what was essentially another realm was weird because theoretically the forest should have been enough. It was also obviously not something Flamel made. The magic was old, ancient even, and the portal was so seamless and established that this place had to have existed for thousands of years. But the young wizard still thought that it might have been an extra layer of security that Flamel used to make sure that the stone wouldn't be found by someone capable of piercing through the veil. The palace was also obviously in disarray, and the realm looked uninhabited for a long time. But he should have seen it coming. The strange runes, the way the magic felt so alien to him. Hell, now that he took a proper look, he could see the pointed ears of the people in the faded paintings and murals. The Fae had obviously made this place. To be honest, the moment he heard that the Fae existed, Harry knew that he wanted nothing to do with them. It wasn't anything personal, but they tended to be tricky, to try to find workarounds and loopholes in any deal they made, and they were extremely greedy. Sure, this was probably biased, but he very much had no plans on testing that out and ending up as some slave because he said something or broke an interpretation of a deal by accident. And to make things worse, he brought Daphne into it. The blonde knew his aversion to Fae artifacts, especially after what he went through in the gardens of Avalon. Of course, all his attempts to avoid the Fae were all for naught, and he ended up staring at the so-called Perenelle Flamel, or was it Nimue, giving him an amused look, relishing at his shock. Still, he steeled himself and spoke up. "I thought you were dead." "Oh, I am dead," the Fae responded with a sly grin. "Very much so." "You look pretty alive to me," he replied, "and yet, Peveril, you cannot hear my song. But let me put you at ease." As she finished his sentence, as if it was some illusion being lifted, the flesh and blood Fae started to dissipate, leaving a transparent wraith. Her features became sharper, more alien, her eyes became completely black, and her teeth more pointed. He tensed, and he could feel Daphne doing the same beside him. In a fraction of a second, she returned back to normal. It took him a few moments to realize that he was gaping at her. How? Death is absolute. I am not surprised that a Peveril says that, and you are correct. Death is absolute. It cannot be cheated. In the end, everybody dies, even the gods themselves. However, not everyone dies at the same rate. My kind is very old. We do not age, and should one of us die, it takes a very long time for our ego to disappear, until we are ready for what comes next. Before the great cataclysm, when we were forced out of our realm, it was relatively simple. Our dead stayed with us until they were ready to move on. But here, in this material world, souls cannot remain untethered without some serious complications, including unbearable pain and even madness. And so, we created this place, an afterlife of our own, as a way for our dead to resolve any unfinished business, to say goodbye before they fade away into death's embrace. Daphne interjected, "You created your own afterlife." Calling it an afterlife is a bit of a stretch. It's more like a pit stop. A way for us to put our affairs in order, a way for children to speak with their parents, a way for the dead and the living to meet once every year. We call it the other world. Quite fitting, don't you think? Once every year, Harry asked, focusing on that last part. Yes, the portal that brought you here from the enchanted forest. It was something we decided to do a very long time ago. After all, it wouldn't do for someone to stay here and forget to live. As brilliant as the magic is, I don't think this is a pleasant place for the dead to linger in. Nimue's eyes became sharper, enraged for a fraction of a second, before she took a defeated and sad sigh. It didn't used to be like this. It used to be a land of eternal youth and beauty. It was supposed to be a paradise before Morgan Le Fay happened, at least. Harry didn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. He could feel the sheer hostility as Nimue spat out the Dark Witch's name. "And did Flamel know about your nature?" "Of course he did. He found me, cursed, dying. It was slow and painful, but I refused to give in. I was holding on for centuries after the Battle of Camlan, and I knew that my death would be near. He found me and took care of me. I had been alone for so long, how could I not have cared for the man? I was dying, and yet it was at death's door that I fell in love for the first time. I suppose a part of me wanted to be mourned, even if it was by a single human, and be remembered in any way. I never expected him to create one of the greatest artifacts in existence just to save me. The elixir didn't heal me, not truly. As much as I hate to admit it, the Dark Witch knew what she was doing when she cursed me, but it bought me time, bought us time. As nice as this story is, I have to ask, why did you bring us here?" Harry answered after a brief pause. "Oh, that's where it gets good. Imagine my surprise after being healed by Nicholas, when I found a letter addressed to me in my own native language. It told me of what Nicholas invertedly did when he performed his ritual, of his future servitude to the light for my sake. He promised me revenge on the light and dark, their complete and utter annihilation even, in exchange for moving things along according to his vision. I was skeptical, of course, but it didn't take long for a champion of the light to hunt my husband down, just as he predicted thousands of years ago. I spoke to Nicholas about what I had discovered, and we chose to accept the offer. The mage's identity was relatively obvious, but he needed to ask, who was he? You know who he is. You wield his magic, even if you do so poorly. The mage's name was Solomon. He rose to heights greater than I ever thought possible for a mortal, almost rivaling gods. He instructed me to do many things over the years, and I pride myself on being a good seer. But only I could barely see a glimpse of his plans, up until a couple of decades ago even. With my curse slowly killing me, even with the elixir, I knew that it was time. Nicholas's death, my death, everything was planned to the last infinitesimal detail. Nicholas walked to his death at his student's hand, knowing that it would be his last, putting our trust, our hopes and dreams into Solomon's plan. You didn't answer my question. Why did you bring us here? Why else, Peveril? It's time for you to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone, she replied with a sly grin on her face, but not before understanding the weight of your decision. I don't understand, he answered, confused. Before LeFay cursed this place, this palace was the size of a small city. The space surrounding it was infinite. It wasn't nearly this corrupt. For centuries, I spent every single drop of my magic, of my life force, just to upkeep this place, to give the dead as much comfort as I could afford. I was their leader once. I failed them, but I would not fail them in this. As I grew weaker, as my life force ran out, the other world shrank and grew dimmer. Nicholas and I were able to repurpose the stone to act as a power source. It is what it is maintaining this entire place. There is no living Fae, not on the material plane at least, no one that could take my place, now that I am dead. Taking out the stone would destabilize this entire place, subject you to the endless pain and madness you talked about before. Why would you be willing to give me the stone then? The previously serene features on Nimue's face turned into snarls. She looked more like her ghost self. Her teeth became pointy, her eyes became darker, and the shadows around the room shifted. Because it's worth it. Because the light and dark deserve to suffer for what they did. It wasn't enough that they invaded our home during the Great Cataclysm and corrupted our kind into light and dark elves for their endless wars. They took our realm from us and then followed us back into the material world where we hid. Look at them, she yelled, waving at the souls floating blankly about. They're supposed to be singing, dancing, feasting, enjoying their time, not this apathy. They could not even leave us alone even in death. So yes, as much as it sickens me to subject my people and me to the pain of the madness this decision will bring, it will be worth it just to know that our sacrifice would help pay them back for what they did to my people. Harry honestly didn't know what to say to that. There had to be a lot of missing contexts, but that kind of grief, that kind of all-consuming anger was true. He could feel it with the resurrection stone almost radiating out of her, ready to burn the world itself, asking to be satiated. She was really willing to subject her own kind to an endless form of torture, just for a chance to kill the light and dark once and for all. He respected that decision, even if he didn't know if he would do the same should he ever be in the same situation. All right, so where's the stone? Nimue's face returned to normal, but her smile became even sharper despite the lack of fangs. Did you think I was just going to give it to you? Kind of, yeah, he answered, slowly feeling trepidation as her grin widened. Isn't that the whole point of you bringing us here? My dear boy, did you really think that I would have revealed myself to you, explained this entire story, just to give you a stone and send you on your way? No, there is a lesson you must learn before leaving this place, a lesson that you will need in the coming fight. And what's that? Now, where would be the fun in that? That's something that you must discover by yourself, after all. I suspect you will do so when you fight the stone's guardian, she answered. He looked confused. Guardian? He's been wanting to see you for years. After all, you did kill his brother. The air seemed to shift around them as Nimue raised her hand, a fey rune flaring to life beneath their feet. A low hum of magic resonated through the chamber as the world around them began to ripple and distort. The magic felt strangely familiar. He could feel it in his gut. Harry opened up his arcane hearing and could feel the realm itself shifting to Nimue's will. Harry tried to negate it by releasing a pulse of magic that was the complete opposite of what Nimue was doing, only for his magic to fizzle the moment he tried to cast it. Nimue snickered in amusement. This place is a fragment of our realm, bound to our rules. under my authority as its queen for thousands of years, while also empowered by the Philosopher's Stone. You will have to do a lot more than that feeble attempt to force me to do anything." Daphne's hand found his just as the two of them were thrown away into a swirling vortex of shadows before landing on a smooth, cold surface. The room they found themselves in was vast and cavernous, illuminated by an eerie shifting light. He didn't have time to look around too much. A gigantic hound, almost the size of a building, leapt from the shadows and ran towards them, denting the floor with every step it took. Harry immediately pushed Daphne behind him as he prepared for the coming fight. He gasped as Nimue's words sank in, and he realized who he was facing. Fenrir. 416, Chapter 416, A Hound's Vengeance. 20 May 1995, The Other World. He didn't have time to look around too much. A gigantic hound, almost the size of a building, leapt from the shadows and ran towards them, denting the floor with every step it took. Harry immediately pushed Daphne behind him as he prepared for the coming fight. Harry gasped as Nimue's words sank in, and he realized who he was facing. Fenrir. The gigantic wolf was about to approach them when he slowed down his perception of time to properly analyze the situation. He could tell from a casual glance that the monster wasn't a physical being, much like his brother, the world serpent. It was also obviously gunning for him, not that he could blame it too much. He didn't know much about Fenrir's weaknesses or powers, really. In Norse mythology, the wolf was a child of Loki, who was bound by Odin in fear of Ragnarok. It was prophesied to swallow Odin, killing the king of gods. Of course, given that Ragnarok was a vastly different event here, Harry couldn't exactly rely on that information. But he could rely on his arcane hearing. He could feel the echo of every movement the monster made in the world around him. It wouldn't be wrong to say that there was an otherworldly tinge to it. Magic seemed to dissipate entirely the moment it came into contact with him or his shadows. Harry tested and expanded the space between them, hoping to give himself a bit more room to breathe, only for the wolf to run through it as if it didn't exist. Harry dodged, pushing Daphne out of the way once more, and retaliated with a bolt of lightning in the monster's opened maw. It seemed to have stung the thing slightly, but nothing more. He tried to follow up, only for the monster to disappear into a shadow. Harry, though, had to dodge when he felt shadows try to stab him in the back and release a pulse of light that was their complete magical antithesis. The spell shielded him briefly, but he knew that it wasn't anywhere near enough. Harry slowly gathered a spell, using Solomon's magic for efficiency's sake more than anything, and he created a ball of light that illuminated the cave with the hope of trapping the wolf in his own shadows. Unfortunately, the beast leapt out right before the attack, connected, and ran towards Harry, only to be caught by surprise as the young wizard turned the ground into quicksand. Daphne covered the entire cave with vines to hold down the beast momentarily, and Harry used his Ice Age spell. White mist appeared from Harry's wand, completely solidifying the wolf, stopping it at a molecular level, immobilizing the wolf completely. Harry knew that it was a temporary binding at best, given the canine's natural ability to somehow negate magic. He could already feel his spell slowly being dismantled, one layer at a time. To buy himself more time, Harry ran forward and touched the vines that Daphne had conjured to bind the beast, only this time freezing them in time completely. It was something he had been playing with at the time, but he never really got the opportunity to use it properly in a fight. With that done, he also created a field of slowed time, which should theoretically slow down even the beast's magical negation. After all, everything was bound to time eventually. The young wizard gave Daphne a soft smile. "Nice work with the vines. You weren't too shabby either. I guess you're not the only one who's good with this adventuring stuff." Harry rolled his eyes. "We'll talk about it later. For now, let's focus on getting out of here. The longer we wait, the more likely Fenrir is going to escape. It's not a physical being, and so physical restraints aren't going to hold it for too long." "Do you have a plan?" the blonde asked. Before he could respond, he felt an explosion which caused the time enchantment around the wolf to fracture, falling like broken glass somehow. The ice that froze the beast started to chip away, and the wolf opened its maw, motioning to bite through the vines. Reality itself recoiled at the act as if it was wounded. as a white tear literally cut through the vines, time magic and all, as if it didn't exist, creating a breach in the dimension itself. He couldn't quite understand what he had just seen, even to his arcane hearing. It felt like a multiversal breach, much like the one he had created when he was stranded in another universe, but with literally nothing on the other side. It took a little while for Harry to realize what it was. It wasn't just a breach. The breach was a consequence of the original effect. He literally cut through space and time to break the vines. No, it was worse. Its effect broke reality itself, just to cut a few vines. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Theoretically, this thing could literally cut through anything, destroy anything. Now that he knew what he was looking for, he understood that his magic negation was built on the same concept. The wolf made microscopic tears in the dimensions that Solomon discovered, destabilizing any magical effect. The prophecies of his swallowing Odin in Ragnarok made a lot more sense now that he understood it. There was no doubt about it. Fenrir was a weapon, much like the world serpent. An effect like that just wasn't natural, and it reminded him a bit of Jörmungandr's fang, only it was an attack on itself, instead of being used as an entry point for the serpent's venom. Well, that didn't matter much. It seemed like he'd have to kill the wolf the same way he did the world serpent. He yelled at Daphne, who had just conjured a plant to redirect one of the wolf's paws, hoping to trip him, to no avail. "We need to keep it still for a bit. I have a plan." The blonde nodded. "Yes, I have an idea." Harry didn't like that Daphne was there with him, fighting against something this dangerous, but he trusted her enough to make a good plan and to, at the very least, ask for help if she was over her head. She should have learned that lesson back in Olympus. Instead of worrying about her, he focused mostly on using Solomon's magic. He was slower with it than he liked, lacking enough practice to do it on instinct like he did most of his other magics. But he would make do. He was trying something he had thought about doing for a while, but never got the opportunity to test it. The last Potter folded space and time, focusing on every dimension the wolf inhabited. It was hard, but the Soul Stone was able to help him. Slowly but surely, he was able to detect them before creating miniature breaches involving every single dimension. It made the spell extremely straining since it didn't use a proper soul for guidance, but Solomon's magic was able to make it efficient and parallelize the spell for each dimension without using too much magic. Harry turned towards the wolf, only to be surprised to see Daphne grabbing her vines with her bloodied palms, which made the plans turn crimson. They started to encircle the wolf, binding it, and it was working, somehow resisting the creature's ability. The red vines first closed its maw, stopping the beast from biting into them as it did before slowly taking him down limb by limb. It was absolutely brilliant. Harry wouldn't say that he was an expert in blood magic, but he understood enough to realize that Daphne's gambit was masterful, to say the least. She somehow got her druidic magic to act as a channel of her own blood magic, to absorb the energy Fenrir used to create tears in reality into strengthening the vines that bound him. It was a vicious circle, one that the wolf obviously hadn't expected. The more it tried to escape, the stronger the crimson vines became, and the spell barely cost Daphne anything other than the initial setup. The beast would beat it when it inevitably realized how the vines worked, or it would eventually overpower them. Despite the brilliant use of blood and druidic magic, the vines could only hold so much power before breaking apart. However, this gave Harry enough time to release his spell. A kaleidoscope of folded space and time flew out of his wand, fracturing reality itself into prismatic fractals. The spell shot forward, shattering the air around it like a piece of jagged glass. Space and time rippled in its wake, bending and folding into sharp-edged prisms that refracted light in impossible ways. It was unstable, raw, and demanding more focus than Harry liked, but it was all he had. The wolf froze for half a second, its silvery eyes locking onto the attack. With a guttural snarl, it opened its maw wide, tearing through the remaining crimson vines holding it. Dark, swirling energy poured from its throat, condensing into a tear in reality. And then they collided. An unstoppable attack met an impossible defense, and the force of the impact seemed to rip apart the very air. Colors exploded in every direction, jagged rainbows clashing with streaks of black nothingness. The world twisted, folding in on itself as if reality couldn't handle what was happening. The ground and sky blurred together, and the horizon bent into spirals that made Harry's head spin if he focused too hard. He felt the pull immediately, a sharp, gut-wrenching force trying to drag him toward the center of the chaos. It wasn't just physical, it felt like it was tugging at his very being. He held his ground, gripping his wand tighter and pushing everything he had into the spell to stop the collapse. The singularity at the center of the clash pulsed violently, threatening to pull everything into it. For a second, Harry thought the entire world might actually fold into itself and disappear. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Daphne, her hands bloody but steady, doing her best to bind herself and him to the ground, to stop them from being sucked in. Slowly but surely, the wolf started to be absorbed by the singularity, but somehow it did not top. Harry saw Daphne struggling, doing her best to keep them grounded. The fear and desperation on her face, the panicked look in her eyes, and Harry couldn't do anything to stop it. Harry slowed down his perception of time, trying to understand what he was missing. He refused to die here, he certainly refused to be the cause of Daphne's death. There was something he had been missing, something that was nagging him since the moment this whole thing began. It hit him like a bolt of lightning, and he smiled faintly at the realization. Grindelwald. That was what made things feel so familiar. It reminded him of Grindelwald's last attack, which brought an entire dimension to their battlefield. The magic was different, of course, but the principles were the same. And so his answer was the same. He started to sing. It came to him as an instinct, like every time before. It came to him whenever he needed it the most, when he had no other choice, no other path to take. He sang, and the world listened. The world around him started to expand. The cave turned into an endless sphere of pure silver that overwhelmed everything around it, until it reached the singularity. It seemed like it wanted to absorb Harry's realm, but he answered by singing even louder. It was a melody that wasn't physical, not something that anyone could understand. Filled with complexities and layered on multiple dimensions. With a roar, his realm expanded, swallowing the singularity before fracturing into pieces. Exhausted, he slowly picked himself up, saw Daphne doing the same, and turned towards a familiar throne room, glaring at the Fae that forced him into the fight. The woman still had that smug smile on her face, only this time it was awed. I dreamed of this often, but it's very different to see it in person. What the fuck was that? He asked, not in the mood for fake pleasantries and the like. That was you defeating the Philosopher's Stone's guardian, of course. Harry noticed that her gaze wasn't at his face, but towards his hand, which clenched a red stone that pulsed with power. The Philosopher's Stone, Nicholas Flamel's prized creation, was in his hand. He barely noticed Nimue making her way towards him and asked, "So Peveril, did you learn your lesson yet?" I have to say, it was quite an entertaining sight. He remembered her saying something about this being a lesson before, but he had dismissed him. How on earth was making them fight Fenrir some sort of twisted lesson? Harry was angry. No, he was beyond angry. He was furious. He raised his wand, space and time being folded at its tip, as if mirroring his anger, ready to be unleashed. She had the gall of endangering Daphne, and call it entertaining. The young wizard channeled the power of the resurrection stone, slowly making her choke in pain and float towards him, unable to move at all. He spoke up softly, a stark contrast to his mood. "Tell me, Faye, are you entertained now?" 417. Chapter 417, Room for Mercy. 20 May 1995, The Other World. The young wizard channeled the power of the resurrection stone, slowly making her choke in pain and float towards him, unable to move at all. He spoke up softly, a stark contrast to his mood. "Tell me, Faye, are you entertained now?" Imagine his surprise when the woman burst into laughter while being bound against her will and snickered, "Of course I am. Do you think that anything you could do would be worse than what's waiting for me, for my people, the moment that stone leaves the other world? Believe me, I'm the one sacrificing a lot for a chance of victory, a chance that you will smother into nothingness if you don't let me finish what I have to say." Harry instinctively let go of the Fae, who slowly floated back to her throne. She cleared her throat and smiled back. "Good. Isn't it better when we're all being reasonable here? The young wizard gave her an incredulous look. You call making me fight Fenrir of all things reasonable? My dear boy, this was not Fenrir. The wolf of destruction left Midgard alongside the gods after the great cataclysm thousands of years ago. What you fought was an illusion. Well, not exactly, more like an actualization of his spirit into a realm of dreams and chaos. It's a skill I perfected over the years, the ability to create an illusion of a higher being that was so complete that it ends up possessed, for a lack of a better term, by the being itself. It was how the gods showed their wills. Back when they were still worshipped, of course. Human faith is a weirdly powerful thing, all things considered. Theory aside, you fought an aspect of Fenrir, not the beast itself. That would have been a much grander battle, and you would not have fared just as well. Still, he hates you with a passion for slaying his brother, enough that he made an active effort to possess my illusion and fight you. Daphne spoke up for him, sounding a bit angry. Harry killed the world serpent, though. And that was a fluke, a plan that was thousands of years in the making. Peveril killed Jörmungandr when he was imprisoned inside himself, bound by the commands of a boy who barely understood what he commanded, while also having the exact weapon needed to kill the serpent. It wasn't some high and mighty battle, just a foolish boy that postured so much, and your little boyfriend who was in the right place, in the right time. Harry could see her point. Aside from shifting ominously, the world serpent hadn't done much during the fight in the Chamber of Secrets. Riddle had just used him as a way to brag or something, giving Harry enough time to take the killing shot. Now, the property of the fangs alone, being capable of cutting through anything, could have probably allowed Jörmungandr to negate the attack by the Colt. That's not to mention the poison infected by the dark that would have probably killed him with a touch. And that was just scratching the surface. The beast was created as a weapon against things that were far more powerful than Harry. It stood to reason that killing a 12-year-old boy, prodigious magic or not, would not have been difficult. Harry nodded his acceptance of that statement, and he spoke up. That makes sense, but you're still evading my question. Why did you make us fight the illusion of Fenrir then? Because you needed to realize what your greatest strength was. You need to be ready for what is to come, and playing around and trying to find clever ways to defeat your enemies isn't going to be enough against the likes of Dumbledore and Grindelwald. Ragnarök is coming, and you are far from ready. Trickery is the only advantage I have, he protested. The Fae, though, seemed to get progressively more annoyed. Trickery isn't enough. It will never be enough. I relied on trickery before, you see, at Camlan, and it cost me everything. It started with Merlin stealing Caliburn, the sword we used to select our leaders, and twisting it into that abomination he called Excalibur. Then Morgan Le Fay had the gall to try to enslave my people, to use them as foot soldiers against her sworn enemy. She massacred most of my people then, when we refused. And so I plotted. I was fighting against a force of nature far more powerful than I, and I found the weakest link in her son, Mordred. The boy's sacrifice was valiant. He broke the prophecy that bound him, and we used it to weaken both Merlin and his mother, even momentarily. I was able to banish them both, hoping to bind them into eternal prisons. There would be no more champions of light and dark, not under my watch. What happened? Daphne asked gently. We underestimated what it meant to be a champion of the light and dark. They refused to be bound, not without a fight. I never considered that they would prefer death to an eternal prison. Most of my people died in that fight, and those who remained were so broken that they cut off our dimension, our home, from the material world, abandoning even our dead, even knowing that it would inevitably twist them in the long run. There was a reason why we settled in the material world after all. As for me, I was a death's door, cursed by Morgan Le Fay's last act, deciding to stay behind and guard the souls of our dead for what little time I had left, lest they be used by the light and dark in some twisted scheme. The Far remained silent for a couple of seconds before speaking up. The moral of the story is very simple. I tried to be clever. I made an overly complicated plan against things that just trampled all over it. Even now, I have no idea what I could have done differently. My biggest mistake was the fact that I was planning around Merlin and Morgan Le Fay, but not the champions of the light and dark. The way they think and react all gets shredded apart the moment they let the entities consume them. I lost everything because of that. It was the day that I truly became the last Fae. It made sense. In a twisted way, Nimue was a reflection of Harry. She tried to fight the light and dark because they were threatening her people. She came up with a plan to make that happen, and it worked. Everything worked as it was supposed to, and yet she still lost. And what am I supposed to do against them? They are more powerful, more experienced, more skilled, the young wizard replied. I've been studying magic for 4 years at most, while they've been at it for decades. Why, you do what you're always meant to do. You sing. Harry gave the Fae a surprised look, to which she burst into laughter. Come on, it's obvious. Do you even know what happens when you sing? The world changes. I create a realm and change its properties, he replied. That's correct. But I don't think you understand the implications of what you're doing. You're creating a realm, and inside, you are effectively a god. Your song is that of creation, and you've been using it as a glorified shield against esoteric effects. But you were able to swallow a magical singularity using it. You're barely scratching the surface of what you can do, of what you need to be able to do. The young wizard nodded in agreement. It had been something that he'd been meaning to practice for a time, only that for some reason his magic was reluctant to express itself without a meaningful reason to. It was as if it had deemed his casual use of it to be unworthy, and he had no idea why. Every time he had sung a realm to creation, it had been because of some crisis. It was like an instinct telling him that he could do it, but given how stressful the situation tended to be, he barely had the time to really analyze what was happening, at least objectively. It was, without a doubt, a very powerful piece of magic, but one whose limits he didn't know, and he couldn't exactly rely on the instinct to sing in any of his fights. As if reading his thoughts, Nimue spoke up. You need help controlling it, guidance. I can offer that to you and an army of elves ready to fight against the forces of the light and dark. Daphne spoke up with a confused tone. Aren't you all dead? Will you not disappear after we leave with the Philosopher's Stone? Harry, on the other hand, wasn't as confused. He had been waiting for it. After all, he was dealing with a Fae. Sure, it was a Fae that had the same enemies as him, but it was a Fae nonetheless. He had read many records of history about their cruelty and countless tragedies about making deals with them. That was before he knew that they had disappeared after Camlan, and he wanted to be careful. He always knew that the magical world was larger than people thought, and he wanted to know as much about it as he could. Never make a deal with a Fae, not for anything. That was the main consensus that Harry got from the dozens of books he found that mentioned them. The Fae in question spoke up, proving him right. We are dead, but souls have possessed bodies before, as long as they don't move on. The main issue was always the fact that the body was never truly compatible and always eventually broke down. But theoretically, if someone was able to enforce that compatibility somehow and had enough power to do it, then it would be enough. Harry could theoretically use the power of the stone to sing our bodies into existence and grant my people a new future. And in exchange, I will teach him our magic and train him to use his singing. My people get to live, and he gets an army. She turns towards Harry. What do you think? Do we have a deal? There it was. Once he'd want someone to help him against the light and dark without asking for something in return. First with Lily, then Acrisdis, and now Nimue. He really shouldn't have hoped for more. Everything inside him protested the deal, from the fact that it would be made with a Fae and the idea that he could give dead people the opportunity to live once more. The latter just felt wrong. The dead had no place in the living world. He had no idea about the consequences of doing this, and there would be consequences, very severe ones at that. One did not break one of the most important laws of nature without some sort of repercussion. Harry's answer was immediate and resolute, no. That wiped the smirk from Nimue's face, which turned into confusion and then barely suppressed rage. I gave you my husband's stone. I'm letting you destroy our afterlife. I am prepared to give you an army and tutelage in magics you cannot even comprehend, and you refuse to help me. I'm not refusing to help you. I'm refusing to bring back those who have passed away. No one has this power, And I'm not arrogant enough to think that even with all that I can do, I can defy death." The woman looked distressed and was murmuring to herself, "This doesn't make any sense. I saw my people's burdens lifting because of you. I saw the smiles on their faces. I was assured that you would save my people. Solomon said so himself. I don't know what you saw, but my decision is final." "Final, is it? Perhaps I can convince you to reconsider," she said calmly, before suddenly turning back into her wraith form and leapt suddenly towards Daphne, only to freeze as Harry activated the resurrection stone and held her soul in place. Harry looked at the stone and an idea sparked in his mind, a fitting one, and spoke up. "I see it now. It's the right thing to do after all." He channeled his magic into the resurrection stone and slowly started to sing, this time on command. He understood, slightly, why his song of creation didn't work when he practiced. It was because what he did with it had to be meaningful. It had to have a purpose beyond the act itself. It was like a light bulb lit up in his head. Fighting for his life had a purpose, but there were other ways to do it as well, without any violence. It seemed fitting, in a way, to have something this powerful only be able to be used in a meaningful way. As Harry sang, the entire dimension started to shift. He used the resurrection stone to connect with every single lost soul in this place, slowly losing themselves to this place's corruption, and soothed them. He slowly guided their souls and turned them from wraiths into elves. Each one of them smiled in comfort slightly, before fading away into nothingness. He could almost feel a flash of coldness when each one of them disappeared. Soon after, only Nimue remained, frozen by the spectacle. She turned to Harry and whispered, "What have you done?" "I saved them. I stopped them from lingering and allowed them to pass on. Your situation isn't natural. You are not from this realm, and the rules of death applying to you were wrong. It's why you were in so much pain when you died, and why this place acted like a poor waiting room, trying to force your rules into a world that didn't have them. Now they are in peace. It's funny, isn't it? Prophecies and visions are so subjective, aren't they? You tried to manipulate me to suit your vision. I don't know if you were bound in some way to give me the stone, or if you were confident enough to give it to me, trusting your visions that you'd be able to make me do what you want. And to be honest, I don't care. I got what I came here for." Nimue's tone became scratchy, and she stared at Harry with her eyes almost glowing from her rage. "For thousands of years, I've led my people. Everything that I did was for them. I wanted to save them and avenge what we'd been through. And you took that away from me. You took them away from me." "I gave them mercy," Harry replied. "Mercy? Well, here is my mercy to you. Your plan is doomed to fail. You wish to use the stone against the dark, and the world serpent's fang against the light. You wish to turn them into a disease, infecting each dimension. Grindelwald will see through it, and you will lose everything, just as I have. So take that useless stone and leave this place, for you will never know peace, boy." Harry froze and stared at the woman in front of him, who had started to cackle in delight. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He just waved his hand and opened a breach back to the forest. With a last act, he bound Nimue's soul to the lake, not allowing her to move on like the rest of her kind. She would remain trapped there, in pain, until her time came. And even when the dimension started to collapse, she wouldn't be able to leave the physical lake surrounding it. He was all out of mercy after all. The young wizard felt some form of vindictive amusement when he saw her wide eyes as she realized what he had done. He could understand being desperate enough to manipulate him, to want to bring back her people and not be alone anymore. But she had also tried to attack Daphne. That wasn't something he wasn't willing to forgive. And so he simply closed the breach behind him and Daphne. He had a lot to think about after all. 418. Chapter 418. Realm of Possibilities. 20. May 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. He was all out of mercy after all. The young wizard felt some form of vindictive amusement when he saw her wide eyes as she realized what he had done. He didn't do anything else but close the breach behind him and Daphne. He had a lot to think about after all. Harry stepped out of the portal near the Black Lake. It hadn't even been a conscious decision. It was just his favorite spot when he needed to clear his head. Hogwarts looked hauntingly beautiful at night. He very rarely got to see it at that time. The moon illuminated the night sky, which was also reflected in the calm surface of the lake, making it look like a second sky. The castle stood tall on its hill, with its turrets and towers glowing faintly under the moonlight. A few windows still had lights on, probably from students cramming for exams or sneaking around after hours. The soft hooting of owls and the faint rustle of the trees in the forbidden forest made the whole place feel alive, like it was watching and waiting. He stared at the sight for around 5 minutes until a voice interrupted his musings. "Are you all right, Harry?" Ah, it was Daphne. He had almost forgotten that she was there. The blonde had remained silent from the moment they left the other world, something that he appreciated immensely. And so he plastered a smile on his face and answered, "Of course I'm all right." He was lying, of course. As much as Harry wanted to deny it, Nimue's last words still rang in his head. They unsettled him. The plan seemed foolproof, for the lack of a better world. He had two sources of the light and dark, their essence in a way, and he'd planned on using them as some sort of virus, infecting each of the entity's energy. The energies of the light and dark would combat them as a threat, trying to purge it away, while also destroying themselves. He had gotten the idea from autoimmune diseases. After all, he couldn't possibly fight against them directly. They were more like forces of nature than physical entities. It would be like a muggle fighting a volcano or something as preposterous. He wouldn't even know where to begin, but getting them to destroy themselves. That was a far easier task. It would have been his masterpiece, his greatest achievement. But the mere idea that Grindelwald already knew of it terrified Harry to his core. Harry hadn't even finished planning yet, and yet according to Nimue, he was already destined to lose. The blonde didn't seem convinced by his lie. "For some reason, I don't believe you." Harry didn't respond, not wanting to show how on edge he really was. Daphne obviously noticed that and changed the subject a bit. "Why didn't you agree to her deal? You could have used an army and a seer of Nimue's caliber." "I could use an army of Fae, but not as much as you'd think. The final battle will not be decided between two armies, but between me, Dumbledore, and Grindelwald. Having an army is more like a safeguard than an actual fighting force, and I already have one in the form of the Lycans, the Department of Mysteries, and Arcturus's forces. Anything more is overkill and definitely wouldn't be worth the consequences of breaking the laws of death." "The laws of death?" she asked. "Everything ends, Daph. The Fae were dead. They made the other world because the material world doesn't really handle their souls properly. They were never meant to be here, and that made their afterlife worse, but they were still dead on a fundamental level. Things could have ended horribly. They could have turned mad and wished for nothing more than to cause senseless slaughter, losing bits of their souls over time. Or I could have been the one to take the brunt of the consequences, which is what I think was what Nimue was planning. The Fae are naturally cunning, and she would have wanted to stack the deck in her favor. I could even see her having something prepared to benefit her people in the long run. I didn't want to trade one war for another, not on the word of a woman that made us fight Fenrir for no reason, and that tried to attack you the moment I refused her." She hesitated for a second. "I understand, really. But you were still cruel." "No, what they were going through was cruel. They were dead. I just helped them move on. Believe me, that's a far kinder fate than me performing some abominable form of soul magic, binding them to foreign bodies, no matter what Nimue said. Death isn't always cruel. Sometimes it's far more merciful than the alternative." "And Nimue? What's going to happen to her?" Harry shrugged. "I suppose when the other world inevitably collapses, she'll still be bound to not leave the lake. The enchantments there are strong enough to hold for a few centuries, more than enough for her to pass on without my interference. And without the stone, she barely has any energy left to cast any magic. She's just a soul, a powerful one, but a soul nonetheless." "But why did she just give you the stone? She had to have known that it would have made her weaker and more vulnerable." "Hope, I think. It's a very dangerous thing. Solomon gave her hope, and for centuries she followed his orders, even as a dead man. It is funny that she, a Fae, never entertained the idea that she was being tricked. She probably had a way of knowing that he was telling the truth. I have no idea how her people's magic worked. She had to have had to verify the information somehow given how blindsided she was when I refused her offer. Solomon tricked her into serving him for centuries, and telling her to give me the stone shouldn't have been that hard to accomplish after that long. If I had to guess, that would be why she gave it to me. Hopefully she'll let go, move on, and accept her death. And her last words? The blonde asked. Was her plan correct? Was that what you wanted to do? Harry flinched at her statement. There was no doubt in his mind that Nimue knew exactly how his plan worked, down to things that he still hadn't figured out. He still hadn't found a way to properly get the essences to infect the light and dark and propagate properly. Each piece of essence was attached with a realm's worth of energy. The Philosopher's Stone had the life force of hundreds of thousands of people sucked into it, and Harry could very easily take whatever remained of Jörmungandr's dimension and seal it within the beast's fang, but that would barely be enough to do anything to the light or the dark. Not really. He needed a way for the essence to self-replicate, and that had been something that he still hadn't figured out. His thoughts were interrupted once more when his girlfriend poked his shoulder. "It's rude not to answer my question." The young wizard rolled his eyes. "Sorry. I was lost in a thought for a bit. But yeah, her prediction was pretty in line with what I was planning to do." "And now what are you going to do?" Harry looked at the sky for a bit and answered, "I don't know." It seemed foolproof. Nimue could have been lying to get me to drop a viable plan, but even then, if she's seen it, then Grindelwald probably did as well, and he could take measures against it, whatever they could be. I could theoretically use their ritual against them, use the instability during prophecy's destruction that they would create to hide against any sort of divination for just a few moments. But that's a small window, and I might be too late to stop them. Either way, I'm still going for it. The blonde gave him a confused look. "You just told me that Grindelwald will probably see it coming." "It's a good plan, one that could technically work. Until I find an alternative, it's what I'm going with. And even if Grindelwald sees it, then he'll have to spend a lot of resources to stop it. And that's still a viable distraction." "I'm not sure, Harry." Harry didn't doubt that. The thought of wasting time implementing a plan that would most likely fail didn't seem appealing to him either, but this was literally the best he got. Hell, he could even break a prophecy of his own and use that to attack the light and dark directly before either of them are ready to prepare. Nimue said that she knew what his plan was and when he'd implement it. That also meant that he was on a bit of a time crunch. "This is the first time that I have a workable plan, a true plan that is beyond just messing with Dumbledore's and Grindelwald's plans. This is a chance at actually winning Ragnarok, of not only defeating the Light's and the Dark's champions, but the entities themselves." Daphne grabbed his hand gently. "I know you're under a lot of pressure, but wouldn't it be better to leave if you don't have a viable plan? We could run away, just the two of us, maybe with our friends and family, and not deal with anything to do with the light and dark." Her words made Harry pause. There was logic in them, logic that he couldn't refute. Nimue's last words meant that the outcome of the fight ahead became a lot less certain. Harry never liked to enter a conflict without stacking the deck in his favor, and if the Fae had it right, then he was massively fooling himself. But there was something that niggled his mind. Nimue was ready to join Harry, and that meant that there was a way to win, a way that was similar yet different. She had waited centuries for revenge against the two powers and specifically chose this time to make her move. He just needed to find it. The young wizard turned towards her. "I've been running ever since this thing started, and everyone and everything kept grabbing me back into the conflict. I entered the European tournament to get away from Dumbledore, only for him to have an elaborate plan regarding it. I went with you to Olympus with no intentions of interfering whatsoever, only to end up fighting the Olympians and Grindelwald. And that's just scratching the surface. I'm done running, not when fate will probably find another way to pull me back." And wasn't that a bitter pill to swallow? Now that he had a better perception of fate, enhanced by Solomon's magic, he could feel destiny's influence on everyone around him. It was more like a tapestry of possibilities. Everyone had small strings surrounding them, but Harry's were more akin to chains than anything else. It didn't mean that he wasn't free to make his choices, only that his choices would always take him to the same destination anyway. It was hard to put into words. It wasn't a prison, but more like a fundamental law of nature. No matter how strong he threw something, it would always find its way back into the ground. It might not land in the same spot, but it would always work nonetheless. Seeing the saddened look on the blonde's face, he put a smile of his own and reassured her. Solomon said that I have a path to victory, a chance at winning, and I don't see any other way. Either I do nothing and keep contemplating, trying to find another plan and implement it in less than a month, or I can spend some figuring out how to adapt an already existing plan into something more workable. It was like a light bulb lit up in his head. It could work. The entire thing fit perfectly, like he had found the final piece to the puzzle, and Harry couldn't help but burst into laughter. Solomon, you magnificent bastard, this was beyond brilliant. Daphne gave him a questioning look. What is it? Harry simply grabbed her suddenly and kissed her, leaving her breathless. Suddenly, he felt a privacy spell trying to impact the world around them, and he took over it in less than a second. Harry turned, glaring at whoever tried to interrupt them. It wasn't hard to recognize who they were, and given how their nervousness was obvious to his arcane hearing, mixed in with a drop of righteous anger, their intentions were probably not innocent. With a flick of his hand, their wands were thrown from their hands, and they found themselves unable to move. It wasn't a hard decision to make, after all. Harry rolled his eyes in exasperation. Longbottom, Granger, I was under the impression that we had nothing to talk about anymore. So could you kindly fuck off? He'd gotten pretty familiar with the songs of the two Gryffindors. He had to admit that Neville's song felt clearer, more stable, ever since Harry removed the Horcrux from his scar. Well, he wasn't a ticking time bomb anymore. Granger's was more like a computer. Everything was organized and methodical. It was a pretty sad sight, to be completely honest. Neville growled at him, "Not before you save Hermione." He expected the answer to be something like this. The unnaturally bound soul that Granger was clumsily trying to hide under a warded expanded bag was more than enough to figure out what they wanted. It would have probably been enough to hide the diary from most mages, but not someone like him, who actually had a passive understanding of soul magic. Were they seriously hoping to force him into giving the girl back her soul? Given the way the young girl was glaring at him, they certainly weren't planning on asking kindly. All in all, he had a single response to this. You're both fucking idiots. 419, Chapter 419, The Last Laugh. 20 May 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. Neville Longbottom knew that this was a bad idea. It wasn't exactly a hard conclusion to make. He learned time and time again that trying to force Harry Potter into a position he didn't want was a very easy way to get outplayed. Dumbledore had learned that the hard way many times, as did the ICW, the Minister. Now that Neville thought about it, a very disturbing number of people tried to oppose Harry, and all of them ended up losing. Yeah, he wasn't looking forward to this, not at all, but he was doing it for Hermione. The Muggleborn had stuck by him through thick and thin, stayed his friend despite failing to save her in the Chamber of Secrets, and didn't sneer at him like most people would when he told her that he was pretty much not a Longbottom anymore. It was a dark year looking back. When the world turned on him, when Harry betrayed him, lost all of his so-called friends, when he felt constantly guilty about Hermione's fate, he became easily manipulated and relied on the feeling of channeling something very dark, and obviously very evil. It had been nice to be regarded as a powerful wizard. No wonder Harry liked it so much. And yet all that talent drove him to almost kill someone in a fucking school competition. He had been at his lowest after that, still regarded as a serial killer in the making and having been essentially disinherited. Hermione coming back in the summer was the literal light at the end of the tunnel, and he refused to let her slip between his fingers again, not when he finally had her back. The idea of her being mind-controlled by some unspeakable into becoming a monster frightened him, to say the least. It was enough that he was willing to risk Harry's ire. As powerful and terrifying as the other boy was, he wouldn't go too far. Well, he hoped he wouldn't. He still felt bad about it, since Harry had just saved him by removing the Horcrux from his scar, but Hermione's well-being overwhelmed any other feeling he might have had for the other boy. To be perfectly fair, the first part of Hermione's plan had gone without a hitch. He had been nervous about stealing the diary from the Department of Mysteries, but the entire heist was over in less than an hour. It was funny, being under polyjuice and robes, and just waltzing into the Ministry of Magic, taking the elevator as unspeakables, and no one even tried to stop them. Hermione had found a way to get past the first layer of protection to enter the department, and the rest was easy enough. Hermione did all the work, very cleverly breaking through the wards of the rooms, stopping any alarm from being set off, and all Neville had to do was to make sure she remained undisturbed while she tried to break in. He had put up a few privacy wards, enchantments to make people ignore them, and even a disillusionment charm, but it was unnecessary. The Department of Mysteries was essentially empty, something about them being busy investigating some incident and whatnot. Whether luck was in their favor, or it was their plan working out without a hitch, they still got the diary, replaced it with a fake, and got out without leaving any traces. Hermione was practically skipping near the end, and all they had to do was the hard part, getting Harry to help them. It was weird that a heist into one of the most secretive departments in the Ministry of Magic was easier than trying to get Harry to do what they wanted. Neville had no idea how Hermione was planning on doing that, and to be completely honest, he was sort of worried about it. Well, that was when the complications started. For one, they had no idea where he was. Neither Greengrass nor Harry were seen during dinner, and since Neville knew that Harry could sneak in and out of the castle when it was under its war wards, it wasn't out of the question for them to not even be in Hogwarts. It was honestly a stroke of luck that they found Greengrass and Harry talking with each other near the Black Lake, seemingly on a romantic walk, after which they started kissing. The sight did make Neville irrationally angry. He was frustrated, of course. He'd been walking around the castle for hours, trying to find them, and they were having fun. Hermione obviously felt the same way. The way she gripped her wand far tighter than usual was proof of that. Not wanting to miss them after hours of searching, Hermione cast a privacy ward around them, probably hoping to convince Harry to help her without any outside interruption, only for her and Neville's wand to come flying out of their hands. Harry turned and glanced at them for less than a second before saying, "You're both fucking idiots." Wait, what? Why the fuck would Harry call them idiots? They hadn't even said anything. Neville was absolutely struck speechless, but Hermione thankfully kept her wits and asked, "Why are we idiots?" "You mean besides trying to set a ward around a couple who were kissing?" he blandly replied. Neville blushed. "It's not our fault that you've been very hard to pin down." Harry shrugged in response. "That's hardly my problem." Right as they were about to bicker, Hermione interrupted them. "Harry Potter, you owe me, and I'm here to collect." Any drop of amusement disappeared from Harry's face. "And pray and tell what I owe you, Granger?" "Your mother." "My mother is dead," Harry replied with sarcasm dripping in his tone. "She is," the Muggle-born agreed, "but that doesn't change what she did to me." Harry was about to respond, but Greengrass stopped him by grabbing his hand. He looked at his girlfriend in surprise before just nodding at her. It was like the two had a private conversation. "Look, Granger, Lily Evans didn't do anything to you. You're the idiot who got her soul swallowed up in a diary. The unspeakables are the ones who tried to use you as a weapon. All Lily did was give you a couple of frankly harmless orders, hoping that you'd stay out of her way, and yet here you are, making a nuisance of yourself. And all in all, Harry had no hand in anything that happened to you." Hermione practically snarled at her. It was the most emotional Neville had seen her ever since she came back. She quickly steeled herself. "Well, let's agree to disagree. Lucky for me, I'm not exactly asking him for help." The last Potter hummed, looking more amused than anything. "Let me get this straight. You're coming to me, needing my help, because Neville probably blabbed about me removing his Horcrux. And instead of trying to make a deal, instead of trying to appease me or anything like that, your plan is to threaten me, try to force me to put your soul back into your body. No, I want you to teach me soul magic. I'm not trusting anyone with my soul, not anymore," the Muggle-born answered without denying anything. "Wow. You want me to teach you a very dangerous form of magic that was lost to time, a form of magic that I still haven't fully mastered while threatening me. Are you seriously hearing yourself? The sad thing is that you can't learn, not really. Soul magic needs a certain form of perception of the world. It's chaotic and yet rigid at times. It needs a lot of improvisation, since no two souls are really the same. And unfortunately, You're not good at that. You're very smart, very quick at understanding, an ideal operative, but you're so materialistic, your thoughts are so rigid and logical that you'll never be able to understand soul magic. And even if you were suitable, there is nothing that would get me to teach it to someone who's acting the way you are. You will if you don't want everyone to know about your soul magic. They wouldn't be as kind as I am about it, and they'll target your weak point. That last statement was ominous, especially since Hermione was staring right at Greengrass, essentially threatening her. When Hermione said that she was certain that she could convince Harry to teach her, he didn't expect her to threaten his girlfriend. He would have refused otherwise. Sure, he knew that the negotiation wouldn't be exactly friendly, but not that Hermione was planning on getting them both killed. There were rumors about what happened when someone hurt Harry Potter's family. The Lycans had literally disappeared, even since they attacked Arcturus Black. Neville did his best to research a bit about what happened outside the castle with the war wards being lifted, and apparently Lycans just stopped going out in public, without any sort of warning. According to a lot of auras, Harry had left the hospital on the warpath. It was probably the Daily Prophet embellishing things again, but there had to be some truth to it. The moral of the story was very simple. Do not mess with Harry Potter's friends and family, but Hermione didn't seem to have taken that to heart. Neville turned towards the Muggleborn and asked, "What the hell, Hermione?" It hadn't even been a conscious thing. He was just blindsided by the way the Muggleborn acted. Maybe it was her desperation, maybe she had something else up her sleeves, but the way the amusement disappeared from Harry's face, the way his eyes narrowed at the both of them, well, Neville would be lying if he said that he didn't shiver slightly in fear. Hermione, though, gave him a warning glance and turned back towards Harry, expecting a response. And she got one as the last Potter spoke up, his voice frosty. "Did you think that coming here hoping to blackmail me would change anything? I can just as easily tell people about the Horcrux in Neville's scar, about how he isn't even a Longbottom anymore, or even I can tell them about your diary, that you're not healed yet. Do you think the public wouldn't demand killing Longbottom for the danger he represents? Do you think the Wizengamot is going to care about some Muggleborn's plight? No, they'll say that you're technically an artifact, not a witch, and they'll use you as a weapon. I can protect my friends and family, can you say the same for yours?" "You don't have any proof," Neville answered, panicked at what Harry had said. "Neither do you, but unlike you, the evidence of Hermione's nature can be very easily procured. All it would take is a snap of my finger." The young wizard snapped his finger, and a familiar diary materialized in his hand. Hermione's eyes widened in panic and opened her expanded bag, only to see it empty. Harry rolled his eyes. "That's just sad. Did no one tell you that souls are multidimensional in nature? A small expansion charm and a ward wouldn't do much to hide it from me. Maybe it would work on a couple of detection charms, but someone who actually knows soul magic. Now that I have it, I wonder what I'll do. I could kill you, right here, right now. No one would even bat an eyelash. I could force you to go attack the Ministry, turn you into a criminal." Neville ran towards Harry, trying to snatch the diary from his hands, only to find himself back where he started. He was wandless and severely outmatched. He gave the other wizard a pleading look. "Harry, please." Harry and Greengrass exchanged a look once more. This time it was far longer. Neville didn't know what silent conversation they were having, only that by the end, Harry's eyes softened slightly, and he released a tired sigh. "Look, I'm tired. I've had a very draining day, and I certainly didn't need the two of you running here with a half-baked plan to blackmail me. So I'm going to do you a solid. This is it. From this day forward, I don't know you. Either of you lay here, dying, then I will do nothing to stop it. It's not my problem anymore." He turned towards the frantic Hermione and spoke up. "You will never speak to anyone about my capabilities. You will not knowingly interfere in my affairs with the intent to hinder me or my goals. You will never try to hurt me, either directly or indirectly, or anyone that I love. And if Longbottom ever tries to do the same, you will kill him." Neville's eyes widened when he realized that Harry had just used the diary to enforce his will on Hermione. He had essentially enslaved her. Hell, one of the commands was to kill him. Before he could say anything else, Harry grabbed the diary and took out a small spark of light from it, which he pressed firmly into Hermione's chest. Immediately after, the diary turned into dust. He yelped in fear, expecting the worst and seeing Hermione dead. But she wasn't. She was just standing there, gaping at Harry, touching her face while murmuring, "I'm free." Like an owl, she turned towards Harry. "Something is wrong. What did you do? I only put your soul in your body, but you forgot what the unspeakables did, didn't you? What they taught you was never in your soul, but in the diary itself. They didn't know any soul magic, just realized that you could learn through it. And with the diary gone, you're back to your old boring self. Your brain was never really in charge of your thinking. No, it was the enchantments in the diary. No diary means no superpowered brain, no extra knowledge, nothing. You're just a normal muggle-born now. You're not special, not anymore." She ran towards Harry only to freeze in her tracks. "Did you forget about your last orders? You can't harm me." "But why would you want to? You're free now, aren't you? You have your soul back. Isn't that what you wanted?" Neville glared at the other wizard, who interrupted him. "This concludes any business we have left. The only reason I wasn't as severe is because of our history together. This ends now. We are done. No more adventures, no more deadly escapades, just live a quiet, unremarkable life, and we won't have to speak to one another again. Goodbye, Neville, Hermione. Live well." Harry grabbed Greengrass's arm and started to walk towards the castle. The former Longbottom scion was frozen for a fraction of a second before turning while yelling, "Now wait a minute." As he turned, he realized that he was somehow right outside the Gryffindor common room. Hermione, still speechless, just went to her knees, tears flowing from her eyes. "It's over." Neville didn't know what to say. She had fucked up royally in how she handled the interaction with Harry. That was a fact, which could have easily gotten them hurt or even killed. A part of him wanted to lash out, to tell her how stupid she had been, but one look at her face made him freeze. Instead, he just agreed with her. "It is. You have your soul now." "Then why do I feel like I lost?" "You did. We did. But that doesn't matter. What's important is that you're free now." The Muggle-born sniffed. "I'm not special anymore." "I was never special," the former Longbottom scion answered. "That doesn't make me any lesser, only like everyone else. But you've always been special, the brightest witch of your age. You can always still grow. We still have time." "Together?" she asked with vulnerability in her voice. "Yes, together forever," he replied without a drop of doubt in his voice. Neville didn't know what would come in the future. He always felt like his path had been dictated to him. But that wasn't the case, not anymore. As badly as this went, this was an opportunity for both Hermione and him, an opportunity for a new beginning. A new beginning. Yes, he liked the sound of that. 420. Chapter 420, Great Heights. 23rd May 1995, Nurmengard. Gellert Grindelwald emerged from the shadows to his office, feeling victorious after his plan worked without any issues, yet whatever smile on his face disappeared as he stared at what was left of his hand. It wasn't flesh and blood anymore, just an expression of his skill in materializing the energies of the dark. Most of his body was, really. As much as he didn't want to worry Albus, the Red Witch's last attack should have killed him. If it had been in his youth, it would have, without a doubt. It was only his connection to the dark that stopped him from being erased from existence, and he only managed to do that by his skill in channeling the dark without needing a physical body. He had turned most of his body into an elaborate energy construct that mimicked his flesh. It severely limited his power due to how much concentration he needed to keep his body functioning. But that wouldn't be for long. He'd been preparing for weeks for this moment. His life's work was on the brink of being completed, and he wouldn't miss it, not for anything. There was also something else, something that niggled in his mind, another reason to be at his best, and that reason was Harry Potter. When he spared his life a year back, he never expected the boy to become such a threat. It was simple. The boy was a Peverell, and was likely to be the hero of Ragnarok, and as impressive as he was still a teenager with barely 4 years of magical education. Manipulating him should have been an easier way to ensure that Ragnarok would occur exactly like he envisioned. It had worked well enough until Olympus. Wasn't that a massive failure? His injuries aside, Gellert didn't like how closely they were to lose everything. It was only Albus' ingenuity that saved their plan from being completely scrapped, allowing Ragnarok to occur unimpeded, uncontrolled, and with nothing more than ashes remaining from the aftermath. Trying to control a prophecy was a very delicate endeavor, to say the least, and it was only Gellert's skill in divination that allowed him to make plans that made it feasible, a skill that the boy counteracted during their duel. He had relied too much on his connection to his multiversal counterparts, a connection that had been severed in Lily Evans' last attack, leaving him having to face the cloudy uncertainty that was normal divination. Sure, Gellert was a seer of immense power, but he was fighting destiny itself, and fate definitely didn't approve of his plans. It was something he discovered when it hid his loss to Dumbledore half a century prior, destroying his younger self's life's ambition of saving the magical world from the Muggles. It had taken him a while to move on from that fact, to accept that even as a seer, fate was not on his side. Thanks to the dark, he had been able to craft a replacement of his divination, something that had taken him years of effort and energy to pull off, time that he certainly didn't have anymore. When Lily Evans attacked his connection to the dark, she also ruptured his own connection to his alternates, and now his greatest injury was how blind he felt. Sure, she had killed herself in the process, but she had hurt him far more than any other person in his life. He hadn't told Albus of his disability. His old friend still trusted his orders. He should have been able to handle the Potter boy to finally wipe him off the board. He wasn't a reliable pawn, not anymore. Gellert would have to manage without him. The prophecy would choose someone else to act as its hero, and the plan would still work. Albus should have been able to handle him easily, and yet he had lost a duel. He had lost the Elder Wand to a child, the sheer madness. Gellert knew that fate was favoring the boy. It had to be Ragnarok's prophecy, making sure that he would survive until its completion. That was the only explanation. He couldn't know, not without his full sight, and so he had found a way to get it back. He would push his seer abilities into heights that no one had ever experienced before him. He would defeat destiny at its own game, ensuring that his final plan would be completed. Gellert opened a drawer and took out a small ritual dagger. It was an ugly thing, looked like it was made of stone more than anything, but the energy that it released was so similar of his own, of another champion of the dark. The dagger of Namtar, one of the oldest champions of the dark, was worshipped as a god in ancient Mesopotamia. It was one of the oldest magical artifacts ever discovered, and there was no denying how powerful it was. With that done, the champion of the dark moved through the shadows to a temple on the other side of the continent, where 13 vampire elders stood there, ready for what awaited them. There were very few elders remaining after they were hunted down in the previous tasks. The Potter boy had gotten very good at killing them over time, probably using his soul magic. That was a very nasty piece of magic that hurt even him. There hadn't been many to begin with, but a vast majority of them died in the last few years alone. It was a shame for some of his strongest servants to perish like that. But if everything went according to plan, he would have no need for them anyway. They were suitable like this, as a sacrifice to his own ends. As he entered the ritual circle, it lit up in blue light. To say that it was a masterpiece would be an understatement, and he wasn't even exaggerating. He had worked hand in hand with the dark to make it happen. His patron was surprisingly agreeable, probably looking forward to Ragnarok, to the final battle with the light, despite the fact that Gellert had done his best to block out his influence over the years. It was something that he managed far better than Albus, who still relied on the light's advice, despite the fact that they both knew that the power's ambitions could contradict their own. It was why he didn't tell Dumbledore the true extent of his plans after all. Still, a ritual of this magnitude wouldn't have been something that he would have ever managed on his own. It was probably one of the greatest acts of magic in the history of mankind, and yet very few people would realize what it was. Gellert raised his hand up, and the vampire elders all froze, before slowly being hollowed out, their very essence sucked into the ritual circle whose light darkened in reaction to it, moving towards the middle, where a familiar bound creature kept thrashing in panic. It looked like a mix of a sloth and an ape, with silky white hair and large eyes that were glowing blue. It was a demigeese, one of the few magical creatures which can boast having a connection to the tapestry of destiny itself. It could turn invisible, of course, but the champion of the dark knew for a fact that divination was a form of magic that was far more powerful than most people thought it was. To be perfectly honest, Gellert had no idea how such a creature came to exist. It was probably some magical anomaly that affected a bunch of apes, creating them. Still, looking at the creature, he could see the fear in its eyes as it saw the fate that awaited it. Gellert didn't relish in it, didn't wish for a creature as unique as this to suffer. Instead, he gave it a sad look. "I'm sorry, I truly am, but I have no other choice. If it's any consolation, your death will save more people than you could possibly comprehend." The demigeese stopped thrashing, gave him a hateful look, and closed his eyes. It had accepted its fate, of course. Gellert grabbed his dagger and stabbed the demigeese in the heart. The ritual circle enlarged itself, releasing an enormous pulse of magic that spread around him, with a very simple command to kill every demigeese around him and absorb their essence. Normally, it wouldn't have done much, but Gellert's forces had spent weeks capturing every demigeese they could access in the Far East. He had thousands of them just bound outside the circle, ready for his ritual. Slowly but surely, their essence started to be contained in the circle, and he stood there for what seemed like an eternity, but was probably around a couple of minutes until the curse ran its course, killing every single demigeese he had captured. Thousands of life forces coursed through his body, the energy slowly rebuilding his flesh and blood, while he felt his magic shift slightly to accommodate its new property. Oh, he could see it now, the difference between his previous bastardization of divination and what a demigeese could do. They didn't make simulations of the future as he had before. They didn't brute force their way in. It was far more elegant than that. They saw the tapestry of fate as exactly that, a series of choices and consequences. He could see as much as his mind could handle, which was sadly not as much as he liked. The level of detail, the number of choices, that was too much. He could also see the knots, symbolizing prophecies that led up to similar responses. He was still limited by the amount of energy he could handle. Sure, he was far more powerful, able to stretch his visions for far longer than the creatures ever could, but outside of using the dark to filter out the possibilities, he couldn't really see everything. However, using the dark wasn't something he wanted to do. He didn't trust the entity, especially considering what he had planned. It wasn't that much of a limitation. He didn't have to see everything. He couldn't before, anyway. But he could still see a few decisions. He tried it out for a bit, trying to see the outcome of his plan, only to freeze. A lot of his lines just disappeared right before one of the greatest knots he had ever seen. A knot that collected every other string. It must be Ragnarok, and his line's disappearance meant one thing. He had died in them. Gellert looked at how it happened and froze completely. The last magical release failed, even when they killed the Longbottom boy, and the backlash from all of the other magical releases they had stored destabilized, killing both Gellert and Albus. That meant one thing: his prophecy was either fulfilled or broken. He was leaning towards the latter, and that meant that Tom Riddle was dead. Who was responsible was a very easy thing to realize: Harry Potter. If Gellert hadn't been successful with his endeavor, the boy would have succeeded in killing them and probably wiping out half of Britain with the magical release. Why couldn't that boy just stop meddling and die already? Gellert, realizing that Tom Riddle was dead, created a few lines, one where they used a different prophecy for the final task. Funnily enough, Albus had another one practically ready, which he didn't want to use. Oh, it seemed that Gellert wasn't the only one with secrets. It was funny, they were both playing with one another. At least Albus hadn't gotten rusty in his old age. And yet, his string still disappeared. How was that possible? By the powers, it was Harry Potter once more. How did that happen? Gellert looked at it slightly deeper and literally froze as he realized what he had just witnessed. The mad, brilliant boy had managed to destroy the light and the dark. He created a form of disease, using the Philosopher's Stone and Jörmungandr's Fang that infected both powers, making them kill themselves. Gellert couldn't help but watch, spellbound, as he realized what was happening. He expected the boy to be a nuisance, with fate helping him at every measure, But this was beyond an act of destiny. This was sheer brilliance. Even now, a part of Gellert had underestimated the boy's capabilities. Sure, he was extremely dangerous, but without the strongest prophecy in existence protecting him, he shouldn't have been that much of a threat. But this was beyond anything he could have dreamt of. An actual end of the light and dark because of a boy who hadn't even reached his majority. For thousands of years, people have tried to stop them, with Solomon being the closest. And he was one of the strongest mages in history, an unparalleled genius who also had gotten lucky. But this was different. Without even thinking, he sent the vision to the dark and watched as it had gotten as well. Fate had also hidden this from the entity, which definitely didn't like the idea of actually dying. It was probably planning on resisting this assault somehow, and Gellert had ideas of his own that he wanted to implement. He didn't trust the light or the dark, but he needed them. They were the key to his greatest ambition, to finally free the magical world from its shackles. Finally, with that out of the way, the path forward was far clearer. Almost everything ended with his plan working and Ragnarok occurring. There was nothing after that, the event probably being something that fate itself couldn't perceive, but in all of them, Harry Potter lost, watching in despair as his ritual was completed. It didn't matter that he couldn't see what was coming after. The ritual working was more than enough for Gellert to make very accurate predictions of what would happen. Still, it was surprising just how much effort it took him to win because of the intervention of a single child. With barely a thought, Gellert conjured a Patronus in the shape of a dragon and sent it towards Dumbledore. "Albus, we have a problem. Tom Riddle is dead, and there's something we need to talk about. We need to make a few changes in our plan." No, he wouldn't let some boy destroy his life's work, not after what he sacrificed. He would succeed. He would forge a world from the ashes where his people would be free. It was his destiny after all.